closing in like the villain who finally decided to steal the script back. Let's not sugarcoat it. What they said about you? Yeah, I heard it. The whispering, the mocking, the fake pity that dripped off their voices like spoiled honey. They acted like you were some tragic character in their story. Cute. Look who is suddenly shaking now that you're here. The same legends who expected you to bow. They're the ones crawling behind the scenes, scrambling to erase the evidence of what they did when they thought you'd never rise again. They thought you'd be too heartbroken, too confused, too tired to ever connect the dots. Jokes on them. You didn't just connect the dots, you built a whole galaxy out of them. Press the like button and subscribe, Chosen One, because if you're here listening to this, you're already paying your revenge forward. Now let's walk into the real story, the one no one had the spine to say out loud. You've been living in the aftermath of a storm you didn't even start. The air around you right now feels different for a reason. You ever notice how quiet it gets right before truth hits? It's that silence where enemies lose their bravado, where the universe holds its breath, where the world watches you step into a space you were never supposed to reach. They feel it, that shift, that change in your energy. And it terrifies them, because the moment you stopped breaking down, their entire ecosystem started breaking apart. They wanted you confused. They needed you doubting yourself. They fed off your uncertainty like scavengers circling something they thought was dead. The second you began healing, even a little, they panicked. Not because they cared, not because they felt guilty, but because your healing meant their lies were losing power. And don't get it twisted. They weren't just running their mouths. They were running strategies. Whisper networks, secret meetings, late-night phone calls where someone always said, "Don't worry, they'll never figure it out." Your name sat in rooms you were never invited to, soaked in jealousy, twisted into jokes, pulled apart by people who had nothing better to offer the world than commentary on you. And here's the part that hits like a blade sliding between ribs. They didn't mock you because you were weak. They mocked you because you were strong enough to intimidate them even while broken. You were the threat they couldn't control, so they tried to rewrite the story. They couldn't handle your resilience, so they labeled it desperation. They couldn't match your loyalty, so they painted it as clinginess. They couldn't stand your glow, so they dimmed every room you walked into with rumors and distortions until you couldn't recognize your own reflection. But history has receipts, and the universe keeps tabs. Remember that phase where you felt like you were losing everything, like you were slipping deeper into confusion, asking yourself why it hurt so much. That wasn't weakness, that was sabotage. Every time you tried to breathe, they tightened the rope. Every time you tried to rest, they planted another story. Every time you tried to rise, they sent a message specifically crafted to destabilize you. That wasn't coincidence, that was orchestration. People love to act innocent when the truth surfaces, but trust me, Chosen One, if you knew what they were saying when you weren't in the room, you'd block them on everything without hesitation, not out of bitterness, out of self-respect. Your pain was entertainment to them. They treated your heartbreak like a group project. Screenshots, whispers, exaggerated reenactments. They studied your suffering as if it made them intellectuals. Some sat there, replaying memories of you like highlights of a game they thought they won. Others used your name as currency to buy the illusion of superiority. But here's where everything flips. They never expected you to survive the hit. They underestimated the villain in you, the version of you that crawled out of the wreckage with clarity instead of chaos, the version of you that understands silence better than noise, the version of you that can see through people now, clean and sharp. What they don't know is that every betrayal matured you, every rumor upgraded you, every silent night rebuilt you. You didn't break, you transformed, and transformation is the one thing they can't undo. Chosen one, the universe watched every moment. When you begged for clarity, when you tried to fix what wasn't yours to fix, when you blamed yourself for the damage someone else designed. You thought you were alone in that dark, but no, you were being rewired. And now you're the storm they can't outrun. You're the proof that their entire performance collapses the moment you stop participating. So, welcome back. You're not the victim in this story anymore. You're the plot twist they never saw coming. Before we go any further, Chosen One, lock in for a second. If you've made it this deep into the truth, it means your instincts are already waking up. You can feel it, can't you? That little spark in your chest that says, keep going, something big is coming. And trust me, if you truly understood what they did behind your back, you'd already be blocking half the people you used to defend. Consider this the moment you step out of their storyline and walk into your own. If you're ready to pull every mask off, expose every hidden motive, and reclaim every piece of yourself they tried to twist, drop the number 777 in the comments. Not as some magical symbol, but as a warning siren to anyone who ever underestimated you. Hit the like button, subscribe, and stay with me, because what comes next isn't just information. It's revelation, it's closure, it's the part where the villain you finally becomes the hero they feared. And now we dive deeper, step by step. And believe me, if you're truly the chosen one, you won't even want to click away. Let's begin. Number 1. The games they played blew up in their face. Funny how the loudest liars always scream victim the moment you stop letting them use your silence as their playground. Now, let's drag this into the light, chosen one, because pretending they were harmless is exactly how they got away with half their nonsense. These people weren't just messy, they weren't just careless, they were architects of psychological warfare. They studied your reactions the way spies study enemy patterns, always calculating, always adjusting their tactics to get a little more control, a little more access, a little more of that twisted sense of power they fed on. And before you blame yourself for not seeing it sooner, let me remind you, their entire personality was a mask. The real face? You were never meant to see it. What they said was always fake concern. You know that tone they used, the one that disguised poison as pity. The classic, "Are you okay?" that sounded less like care and more like they were waiting for you to fall apart so they could feel superior. Every question was a jab, every suggestion was a setup. They weren't checking on you, they were checking your temperature like a hunter making sure their prey was still bleeding. And look who is suddenly acting confused now. The same clowns who studied your insecurities like homework are pretending they don't know why you walked away. They expected you to stay trapped in their little maze of mind games forever. They thought you'd always second-guess yourself just because they trained you to. Let's talk about their favorite trick, covert antagonism. That's the art of stabbing you softly while smiling sweetly enough that you start apologizing for bleeding. They'd remind you of your past mistakes as if they were helping you grow. But really, they were sharpening your guilt against you. They weaponized your honesty. They twisted your openness. They used your empathy like a crowbar to break into your mind. It wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. It was planned. Every conversation was a controlled experiment. Every compliment had a hook hidden in it. Every apology had a loophole. Every "I didn't mean it like that" was a lie dipped in perfume. And here's the part that still makes your stomach flip. They counted on you not noticing. They counted on your kindness. They counted on your ability to forgive faster than they could manipulate. They studied your patterns the way scientists study lab rats. Every time you forgave them, they documented it as proof you'd let them do it again. You ever wonder why talking to them felt exhausting? Why your brain felt foggy? Why you walked away from conversations, doubting things you were 100% sure about previously? That wasn't coincidence. That was psychological erosion. They wanted you confused. Confusion is control. Doubt is control. Silence is control. And when you finally reached your limit, when you stopped nodding along, when you stopped letting them twist your memories, when you said no more, they activated their deadliest tactic, the victim mask. Suddenly, you were unstable. You were overreacting. You were too emotional. You were the problem. They rewrote the storyline like they were speedrunning excuses. The tormentor became the saint. The liar became the martyr. The manipulator became the misunderstood angel who tried so hard to help you. They performed innocence so dramatically it could have won awards. And you stood there feeling like you were going crazy. You weren't. You were waking up. Let's be honest, they didn't want to help you. They wanted to find the softest spot in your soul and dig until you broke. They searched for cracks in you like thieves searching for a window left open. They targeted your insecurities to weaken you. They kept pushing until you questioned your sanity, your worth, your entire identity. But here's the punch they never saw coming. Instead of shattering, you evolved. When they said you'd fall apart without them, they forgot villains don't crumble. They recalibrate. You turned off the noise. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped defending your character to people who had none. You pulled your energy back like a weapon, and that was the one thing they couldn't handle. Your silence was not weakness. Your silence was intelligence. Your silence was the first step of your comeback. Do you know what silence does to manipulative people? It eats them alive. They're used to controlling the narrative. And suddenly, the main character walked off set. They panic, they scramble, they stalk your energy from a distance because they can't stand not knowing what you're thinking anymore. They aren't scared of losing you. They're scared that without access to you, they lose their power. You didn't crumble into their cautionary tale. You became the nightmare of their ego. You became the villain they accidentally created. You became the one thing they can't manipulate, someone who sees the truth. And let's address the question creeping through your mind. Why would someone do this? Why target me? The answer is simple and ugly. They saw strength in you they didn't have. They saw a heart they could never emulate. They saw potential that made them feel small. Your softness intimidated them. Your honesty exposed them. Your loyalty embarrassed them. Weak people despise what reminds them of their own emptiness. And you? You were a walking mirror they hated looking into. They didn't destroy you. They revealed themselves. They taught you how to read energy, how to trust your intuition, how to recognize patterns, how to walk away with your dignity fully intact, even when your heart was bruised. They forced you into a level of self-awareness they never wanted you to reach, because self-aware people don't stay controlled. The manipulation tactics they used weren't signs of your weakness. They were signs of your threat level. Because chosen one, villains don't get targeted. Threats do. And now that you see through everything, now that the mask is shattered, now that you know the games they played, there's only one logical next step. You block them everywhere, not out of fear, out of evolution, out of self-respect, out of the realization that people who wage psychological war on you don't deserve access to your empire. Their tactics failed. Their plan collapsed. Their power over you is gone. And the version of you standing here now? They couldn't manipulate that version even if they tried. The villain became the hero because you finally realized the truth. You were never theirs to break. You were always the one meant to rise. Number 2, the rooms where your name became their favorite lie. Funny how cowards sound brave when the person they fear isn't in the room. Chosen one, let's tear open the doors of those rooms you never stepped into, the ones where your name was tossed around like a weapon and a joke all at once. You weren't there physically, but trust me, your presence dominated those spaces more than the people talking ever could. What they said about you wasn't just gossip. It was a full-blown performance, a script they rehearsed so often they started believing their own delusion. They needed a villain, so they drew your silhouette on the wall and threw darts until it started looking like truth to them. Imagine this, a circle of nervous people pretending to be powerful, whispering your name with the same fear kids have when telling ghost stories. Not because you did anything monstrous, but because your strength, your honesty, your ability to see through people without even trying, terrified them. So what did they do? They flipped the narrative. You were the chaos. You were the dramatic one. You were the unstable one. They said it enough times to each other that it became their religion. They built a mythology around you because the real you made them uncomfortable. Cowards rewrite history so they don't have to face their own fingerprints on the crime. Here's the punch. They didn't just lie to others. They lied to themselves. They needed to believe you were the problem so they wouldn't have to confront their own guilt. Because if they admitted your kindness was real, your intentions were pure, and your loyalty was unmatched, then they'd have to confront the truth that they destroyed someone who never meant them harm. And that kind of honesty? It scorches. Most people would rather burn you than face their own flames. Imagine another scene, a table, your name thrown into the center like bait. One person brings up a distorted version of something you said. Another adds seasoning. Another nods dramatically, as if they're in a courtroom making their final statement. They were building a character, not describing a person. They sculpted a version of you that was easier to hate, easier to blame, easier to sacrifice when they needed a villain to justify their own mistakes. People don't talk about you because you're weak. They talk because your existence exposes them. You ever wonder why they needed such a big audience for their lies? Why they repeated the same stories over and over? Why they exaggerated the smallest moments into scandals? Because deep down, they knew the truth wouldn't sell unless they dressed it up in fear. They were protecting their egos, not the group. They were uniting in the only way insecure people know how, by pointing their shaking fingers at someone stronger than all of them combined. And guess what question is creeping into your mind right now? Did everyone in those rooms hate me? No, not even close. There were people sitting quietly at the edge of the room, people who knew exactly what was happening, people who felt their stomach tighten every time your name was twisted into something ugly, people who saw you clearly but stayed silent because speaking up would have made them the next target. They weren't brave enough to defend you, but they weren't cruel enough to lie about you either. They just froze. Imagine someone in that room staring at the table, refusing to meet anyone's eyes while your reputation got shredded like confidential documents. Their conscience screamed at them, but fear gagged the words in their throat. That silence wasn't indifference. It was self-preservation. The group operated on one rule: agree or disappear. Anyone who questioned the narrative was shoved into the danger zone, and nobody wanted to sit there with you. Not then. And just like that, your absence became their favorite place to dump their insecurities. They painted you as toxic because admitting your goodness would expose their guilt. They called you manipulative because acknowledging your honesty would make their whole script collapse. They labeled you unstable because calling you strong would mean confronting why they tore you down in the first place. It wasn't truth, it was projection. The chaos they accused you of, that was theirs. The drama they pinned on you, their creation, the instability, their emotional mess leaking everywhere while blaming the person who didn't even know a war was happening. And while they were performing their little morality play behind those closed doors, let's talk about what was really going on. You were out there trying to understand yourself, trying to fix things, trying to communicate, trying to heal, trying to be transparent, responsible, kind. Meanwhile, they were backstage handing out roles. You equals villain, them equals saints. Truth equals whatever made them feel less guilty. It's wild how people will weaponize storytelling when the truth threatens their ego. They built a cult-like mentality around your destruction. Every time someone questioned the narrative, the group snapped back with reminders, warnings, twisted anecdotes, and emotional blackmail. We all agree, right? Remember what they did? Don't forget how dangerous they are. They had to keep repeating it to keep the lie alive. Because if even one person stood up and said, "Actually, I don't think that's true," the entire illusion would crack. Lies need a crowd. Truth stands alone and still terrifies them. Let's answer another question sitting in your mind. Do they regret it now? Some do, more than they'll ever admit. They think about you at night not because they miss you, but because guilt doesn't sleep. They replay moments. They realize how easily they allowed themselves to be manipulated into hurting someone who never threatened them. But here's the thing. Guilt after the damage is meaningless. Courage in the moment is rare. Retrospective guilt is cheap. There are people from those rooms who scroll your social media silently. People who imagine running into you and explaining everything. People who want to apologize but are too ashamed to face the version of you that survived without them. They thought you would break. You didn't. You evolved. And now their guilt has no place to land because the person they betrayed is no longer standing in the ruins. They're standing above them. Imagine this final scene, the same room, the same group, the same whispers, but this time, when your name comes up, the energy is different. There's tension, there's discomfort. Someone shifts in their seat. Someone bites their lip. Someone mumbles, "Maybe we shouldn't talk about this anymore." Because the truth they couldn't see back then is clear now. You weren't the problem. You were the threat. And they weren't the heroes. They were the mob that needed a target. They built their identity on breaking you, but you rebuilt yours on walking away. And the universe has a funny habit of rewarding the one who chose truth over performance. Chosen one, those rooms didn't define you. They exposed them. What they said behind your back says nothing about your worth and everything about their fear. And the fact that you're still here, stronger, sharper, and done playing their puppet, that's the final plot twist they'll never recover from. Number 3, the reality they tried to steal from you. Only liars demand you doubt what your soul remembers clearly. Chosen one, let's dissect the gaslighting, their favorite weapon, their signature poison. They didn't just twist the truth, they twisted you. Gaslighting is psychological vandalism. It's breaking into someone's mind and rearranging the furniture so they trip over things that weren't there yesterday. These people perfected it. Imagine this. They stab you verbally, then tilt their head like you're the one holding the knife. Cruelty delivered at 9 p.m., denial by 9:05. They'd say something venomous, then shrug and whisper, "You're imagining things." They'd act cold, then look shocked when you felt hurt. They wanted you questioning your sanity, because if you didn't trust your own mind, you'd have no choice but to rely on theirs. Gaslighting isn't confusion, it's control dressed as innocence. And slowly, your reality began bending. You second-guessed your instincts. You replayed conversations like crime scenes. You wondered, am I overreacting? Am I the problem? That's exactly what they wanted. Your doubt was their leash. But here's the plot twist that burned their whole strategy to ashes. Gaslighting collapses the moment the target stops engaging. The second you stopped arguing, stopped explaining, stopped validating their fake innocence, their entire illusion crumbled. Imagine a magician forced to perform with the lights fully on. No audience, no darkness, no tricks left. Manipulators need emotional reaction, like fire needs oxygen. Your silence suffocated them. Your distance killed their script. You broke the game simply by refusing to play. And now, they're left alone with the truth they tried to bury, and it terrifies them. Number 4. Their little lies turned into a full-blown war. Funny how they needed an entire audience just to attack one person strong enough to stand alone. Chosen one, let's drag the smear campaign into the spotlight, because this wasn't gossip. This wasn't people talking. This was a coordinated hit job on your character, a social assassination plotted by people who knew they couldn't defeat you honestly. Smear campaigns are psychological grenades. Pull the pin, toss the story, then pretend they weren't anywhere near the explosion. And these people? They deployed them with precision. Imagine this. They took your real pain, your real vulnerability, and twisted it like a wet towel until every drop looked like instability. They grabbed your reactions to their cruelty and presented them as random meltdowns. They cut out context like surgeons removing evidence. To them, truth wasn't a value. It was raw material to sculpt a lie. They didn't tell your story. They told a story that kept them comfortable. And the audience? They swallowed it whole. No questions, no curiosity, no loyalty, just instant judgment. You watched people shift around you, colder, quieter, suspicious. Suddenly, you weren't being treated like yourself. You were being treated like the character they invented. The real purpose wasn't just to make you look bad. It was to isolate you. They wanted you walking into every room, already defeated by a reputation that wasn't yours. They wanted your social ground to feel like quicksand. Defend yourself and sink. Stay silent and sink faster. Imagine a chessboard where every move you make already looks wrong because they've rigged the light. Why do smear campaigns work? Because manipulative people pick traps where no response looks good. If you get emotional, see, unstable. If you stay calm, see, cold. If you try to explain, see, defensive. If you don't, see, guilty. And they know it. It's never about truth. It's about caging you inside a story they control. But here's the part they never predict. Truth ages like fire. It burns hotter the longer it's hidden. Eventually, people start noticing patterns. They start seeing that person repeating the same drama cycle with someone new. They start realizing, wait, why does every story end with them as the victim? The mask doesn't slip. It cracks. and when it cracks, their entire narrative collapses like a house built from wet paper. Some people will feel guilty, some won't, but every single one of them will know the truth when it hits, and that knowledge, it won't leave them alone at night. Meanwhile, you rise above the ashes of every lie they told. You don't just survive the smear campaign, you outlive it. Number 5, the celebrations they threw when you fell. Some people don't stab you in the back. They throw parties when you hit the floor. Chosen one, brace yourself, because this part isn't pretty. What they did behind your back wasn't just petty. It wasn't just cruel. It was monstrous. While you were trying to breathe through your lowest moments, while your world felt like it was collapsing, they raised their glasses in rooms you were never invited to. Imagine that. You're crying, breaking, losing sleep. And somewhere else, someone is leaning back in their seat saying, "Finally." They called your pain karma. They called your heartbreak justice. They acted like your suffering was a cosmic reward for them. And the worst part, it bonded them. Your downfall became their group therapy, their entertainment, their weekend pastime. Toxic people don't bond over love. They bond over their favorite target, you. Imagine wolves smiling at each other because they think the lion finally fell. But the poison ran deeper. They didn't just celebrate your struggles, they engineered more of them. They reached out to people in your life with fake concern dripping off their tongues. Those little comments, "I'm worried about them," or "they've been acting strange," were seeds planted with surgical precision, seeds that grew into doubt, suspicion, and distance. By the time you walked back into the room, the soil was already poisoned. You felt the shift before you understood the cause. And here's the part that slices harder than anything. Some of the people you trusted most, your safe people, were double agents, smiling at you while betraying you, listening to your private pain only to serve it on a silver platter to the very people rooting for your destruction. They traded your vulnerability like currency, screenshotting, whispering, reporting, pretending loyalty while feeding your enemies content for their next hate session. Imagine confiding in someone, not knowing they're turning your wounds into a group project. Enemy betrayal hurts. But betrayal from those you loved, that's the kind that rewires you. You weren't paranoid, you weren't imagining things. The room was contaminated, and you were the only one who didn't know. Number 6. The clock they set long before you knew a war was coming. Some betrayals don't start with a knife, they start with a notebook. Chosen one, this part is going to flip your whole understanding of your past, because the timeline you saw wasn't the real one. What you thought was the beginning of the betrayal was just the moment the mask slipped. The real start? That happened long before the first argument, long before the first red flag, long before you ever felt something was off. Imagine this, you're laughing with them, trusting them, opening up, believing you found people who finally understood you. Meanwhile, in the shadows of those same moments, they're studying you. Not with love, with calculation. Every vulnerability you shared, documented, every insecurity you expressed, stored, every apology you made, interpreted as weakness. You were building a bond. They were building a dossier. The betrayal didn't start when they hurt you. It started the moment they realized you were worth breaking. People think betrayal happens suddenly, but real betrayal is slow brewed. It begins in the quiet moments when you felt safe, when you let your guard down, when your heart opened without hesitation. That's when they gathered ammunition. That's when they prepared their version of the story. That's when they built the case they plan to use against you. And you wonder, why wait so long? Why pretend to care? Because they needed you invested. They needed your loyalty before they weaponized it. They needed you to trust them so deeply that when they finally struck, the impact would knock the air out of your lungs. This wasn't impulsive cruelty. This was premeditated psychological warfare. Imagine a chess player moving slowly, quietly, strategically, preparing the board long before the checkmate even becomes visible. That's what they did. They studied your emotional landscape like cartographers, mapping unknown territory, noting every trigger, every sensitive point, every place they could hit you hardest. And when did they choose to strike? The moment you became a threat. The moment you started growing, the moment your evolution exposed their stagnation. Your glow didn't blind them, it exposed how dim they were. Your success, your healing, your growth, those weren't just inconvenient for them, they were intolerable, because people who rely on your weaknesses for superiority panic the moment you start leveling up. Your evolution wasn't an accident. But neither was their betrayal. They always knew the day would come when your light outshined their shadows. And that was the moment they decided the war had to begin. Number 7. Their sorry was just another trap. Some apologies aren't bridges. They're fishing lines thrown out to reel you back into chaos. Chosen one, let's tear apart the fake apologies they tossed your way, because those weren't expressions of guilt. Those were strategic moves, scripts written by people who suddenly realized losing access to you made them look bad. They didn't apologize because truth hit them. They apologized because consequences did. The moment they saw you healing, rising, rebuilding without them, panic set in. Your silence made them uncomfortable. Your progress made them exposed. Your absence made them guilty in the eyes of anyone paying attention. Imagine this, a villain wiping blood off their hands before knocking on your door saying, "Hey, can we talk?" That was their apology, a performance, a public relations stunt, damage control disguised as vulnerability. They didn't apologize to fix the past, they apologized to protect their image. And the apology always came with strings attached, conditions, explanations that twisted the story until somehow you were partly to blame. They'd say, "I'm sorry, but you have to understand," or "We both made mistakes," or "Let's just move on." Translation: I need you to stop telling the truth because it ruins my reputation. Imagine someone handing you a gift box and inside is a map leading back to the same battlefield you escaped. That's what their apology was, an invitation back into the trap. Real apologies free you. Theirs tried to cage you again, and the hollowness you felt, that was your intuition recognizing the mask before the face. Number 8. Their minds are a labyrinth of self-inflicted delusion. Some monsters don't hide under beds, they hide inside their own excuses. Chosen one, this part is darker than anything we've covered so far, because their psychology isn't just toxic, it's terrifying. These people don't sit around plotting like classic villains, rubbing their hands together. No, they're evil. is more pathetic and more disturbing. They genuinely believe they're good people. They've twisted the storyline so violently in their own minds that they've cast themselves as the heroes and you as the villain. They bravely had to defend themselves against. Imagine someone burning down a house, then standing in the ashes, crying about how the match accidentally jumped into their hand. That's their mind, a total rewrite of reality, cognitive dissonance so strong it bends the truth until it snaps. They don't lie to you first. They lie to themselves, then offer you the edited version. Admitting what they did, every smear, every manipulation, every betrayal, would shatter their fragile self-image. So instead of taking responsibility, they double down, they justify, they reframe. They paint every act of cruelty as self-defense. They tell themselves, I had no choice, because facing the truth would force them to confront the monster in the mirror. And here's the part that will make your skin crawl. They sleep peacefully. They don't feel guilt. They don't feel horror. They don't feel remorse. Their minds protect them from the truth, like a faulty alarm system that refuses to ring. Imagine a villain so delusional they truly believe the hero deserved to be destroyed. That's them. And that's why you walking away wasn't just smart. It was survival. Number 9. The move that ends their power for good. Closure doesn't come from their apology. Closure comes from the door you lock behind you. Chosen one, here's where everything shifts from revelation to strategy. You finally see the truth. Now you need to know what to do with it. And let me be blunt. You don't confront people like this. You don't argue with them. You don't present evidence. You don't force them to confess. That's not closure. That's re-enrollment into the circus they run. Confrontation only gives them access, and access is their playground. Imagine trying to wake someone who is sleepwalking through their own lies. You shake them, and they fight harder. That's them. They're not waking up. They're not accepting truth. They're not taking accountability. They're too deep inside their own fantasy to ever meet you in reality. Trying to make them understand is like trying to teach a shadow how to stand upright. So what do you do now? You leave cleanly, coldly, completely. You block them, not as revenge, but as self-preservation. Every open door is a potential entry point for more manipulation, more chaos, more psychological residue. Blocking them isn't petty, it's protective. It's the firewall your heart needed months ago. Next, you grieve, not the real relationship, but the illusion. You're mourning a version of them that never actually existed outside your hopes, loyalty, and imagination. You loved who they pretended to be. You trusted the character they performed. Meanwhile, the real version was plotting behind the curtain, and that realization hurts. But it also frees you, because once the fantasy dies, the truth finally has room to breathe. Number 10. The collapse they never expected to watch. Karma doesn't knock. It walks in silently and rearranges the room while they're bragging. Chosen one, the moment you pulled your energy back, everything around them started unraveling. Not with thunder, not with fireworks, just a quiet shift so precise it felt surgical. That's the part they never saw coming. They thought cutting you down would elevate them. Instead, the universe did what it always does when the wrong people hold stolen power. It flipped the board. Their lies aged like milk left in the sun. The stories they told so confidently started cracking because lies require maintenance, and they're too sloppy to keep the same script straight. Imagine their faces when people replayed old conversations and realized the math wasn't mathing anymore. Suddenly, They were the inconsistent ones, the dramatic ones, the unstable narrators of their own downfall. Karma's favorite trick is letting someone talk long enough to expose themselves. And those alliances they built, held together by gossip and mutual hatred of you. Without you as their common enemy, the glue dissolved. They turned on each other like starving wolves. Fake friendships collapsed, secrets leaked. The same tactics they used on you, they started using on each other. Meanwhile, your glow-up didn't happen in spite of the betrayal. It happened because of it. Once their noise left your life, your clarity returned, your confidence rebuilt, your peace became louder than their drama. Imagine a garden finally growing once the weeds are gone. That's you. And watching you rise while they fall apart. That's the karma they never planned for. Number 11. The day you walked out was the day their empire cracked. Remove the scapegoat and suddenly the real villains have no one left to hide behind. Chosen one. Here's the part they'll never admit out loud. Their downfall didn't begin months later or years later. It started the exact day you left. The instant your energy, your presence, your stability, your compassion disappeared from that environment. The whole group dynamic collapsed like a flimsy stage set with no main pillar to hold it up. You were the lightning rod, the one absorbing every surge of conflict, every projection, every insecurity they threw around like confetti. With you gone, the storms didn't stop. They simply redirected inward. The chaos they once pinned on you started showing up between them. The arguments they swore you caused, now erupting without your name involved at all. The tension they blamed on you, still there, but now with no convenient target to blame it on. Take away the person they scapegoated and watch how fast they turn on each other. Suddenly, the room felt different, tight, hostile, suspicious, because when the chosen one leaves, the truth doesn't stay hidden anymore. The real toxic one can't disguise themselves. The instigator becomes obvious. The manipulator loses their deflection strategy. The bully has no shield. Without you absorbing their dysfunction, their masks cracked at record speed. And just like that, the group that once bonded through tearing you down started tearing itself apart. Your absence exposed every secret, every insecurity, every hidden rivalry. Their downfall wasn't karma. It was simply what happens when the foundation they built on lies loses the only honest soul holding it together. Number 12. Your rise is the nightmare they can't wake up from. Nothing haunts a guilty soul more than the person they tried to break becoming unbreakable. Chosen one, let's make this perfectly clear. Your evolution is their personal horror movie, not because you're doing anything to them, but because you stopped doing anything for them. Your silence, terrifying. Your healing, paralyzing. Your emotional clarity, a psychological earthquake they weren't built to survive. They expected you to shatter. They expected you to crawl back, begging for validation. They expected your identity to collapse without their approval. Instead, you did the one thing their entire manipulation system wasn't prepared for. You leveled up. Your glow isn't revenge. Your glow is the proof they were the problem. Your growth triggers guilt in the ones who know exactly what they did. The moment they see you standing taller, moving cleaner, speaking sharper, something inside them twists. They remember the lies. They remember the cruelty. They remember the moments they laughed at your pain. Now, that same pain forged you into something they can't compete with. Your silence triggers their paranoia. Your distance triggers their insecurity. Your progress triggers their envy. Your peace triggers their denial. Imagine them scrolling through your life, trying to figure out how you're calm while they're still spiraling. Imagine them replaying old memories, realizing you weren't the unstable one. They were. Imagine them seeing your evolution and feeling the truth rise like bile in their throat. You healing isn't just a win for you. It's a psychological punishment for them. It reminds them that you survived everything they hoped would destroy you. And to people like that, your evolution isn't just intimidating, it's unbearable. Number 13, the new era you're about to walk into. Your past didn't break you. It trained you for a kingdom they were never meant to enter. Chosen one, this is the part where the lights shift, the camera pulls back, and the entire atmosphere changes. Because everything before this, every betrayal, every lie, every manipulation, wasn't the ending of your story. It was the origin, the prologue, the necessary darkness that sharpened you into someone who can walk into a new life with eyes that see everything and a heart that bows to no one. You're not stepping into the same world you came from. That version of you is gone. The naive one, the overly forgiving one, the one who thought loyalty could fix people who were committed to their own destruction. That chapter has burned away, and all that's left is the version of you that finally understands your worth. Not because someone reminded you, but because your scars taught you. Imagine this, you walking forward, not with fear, but with precision. Every step calculated, every boundary reinforced like steel, every instinct sharpened to a blade. You don't need to announce this new life. Your energy does it for you. People will feel the shift before you ever speak. They'll sense the difference in the way you breathe, the way you move, the way you no longer bend, where you once snapped. You didn't become colder, you became clearer. Your new life is built on self-respect so high it becomes a gate few can cross. The ones who get in will be the ones who've earned it, not the ones who manipulated entry. Your circle will shrink, not out of fear, but out of intention. You're stepping into a phase where trust is sacred, not automatic, where access is a privilege, not a default setting. And here's the poetic justice in it all. The same people who tried to break you will now watch from outside the fortress. Not because you're hiding, but because they were never meant to stand beside the version of you that survived them. Imagine them seeing you now, stronger, smarter, emotionally lethal in the best way. They don't get to claim any piece of the life you're building. They don't get to witness your growth up close. They don't get to harvest the piece they never planted. Their chapter closed the moment you chose yourself. Your silence didn't end the story, it upgraded the author. You're stepping into a life where you don't chase answers. You create closure. You don't entertain chaos. You shut the door on it. You don't prove your worth. You radiate it. And anyone who tries to rewrite your history simply exposes their own. This new era isn't about revenge. Revenge is small. You're too evolved, too experienced, too awakened for that. Your victory is bigger than revenge. Your victory is living a life so aligned, so peaceful, so powerful that the person they try to destroy becomes unrecognizable even to you. Walk forward now, not as the wounded one, not as the survivor, but as the villain turned hero of your own universe. The one who finally writes the story without asking permission. And now, chosen one, you've reached the end of the truth they never wanted you to see. You've walked through every shadow they cast and stepped out brighter, stronger, untouchable. This is your closing chapter with them, and your opening scene in a new era built on power, clarity, and absolute self-respect. If this message hit where it needed to, press like, subscribe to stay in this circle of truth. Drop 77 in the comments to seal your transformation and share this with someone who needs their eyes opened. Your story starts fresh from here. Number 5. When their poison stopped working and they realized you can't be infected twice. Nothing scares a manipulator more than the day their favorite tricks stop having any effect. It's like watching a magician choke when the rabbit refuses to die. They always misunderstood what you were made of. They thought angels were just vessels of light, floating around with open arms and soft hearts. They never realized angels carry darkness in their archives like a secret map. Not because they belong to the dark, but because they've battled it, survived it, reshaped it into wisdom. Real angels aren't naive. They're forged, tempered, hardened through contact with every shadow that tried to swallow them. Imagine this: someone keeps feeding poison to a creature they think is fragile, and suddenly the creature stops reacting. Suddenly the poison stops working. Suddenly the predator realizes the victim has grown fangs. You tried to stay pure, didn't you? You tried to stay soft. You tried to keep your intentions clean, your spirit clear, your heart untangled from the mess they kept dragging you into. But they were relentless. They kept injecting toxicity into every connection you offered, dripping venom into your trust, trying to twist your goodness into submission. They wanted to contaminate you just enough to keep you controlled. And when a system is attacked, it doesn't collapse, it adapts. Your evolution was biological, emotional, spiritual, a full body upgrade. Their poison became your vaccine. Their lies became your antibodies. Their manipulation built your resistance. Let me answer the thought swirling in your mind. Why do I feel nothing now? Because that's what immunity feels like. It looks like indifference. It sounds like silence. It feels like absence. They interpret it as coldness, but it's not cold. It's clarity. You're immune to their guilt trips now. Immune to their crocodile tears. Immune to their recycled apologies. Immune to their desperate last-minute promises. Imagine someone trying to punch a brick wall. They keep hurting themselves and calling the wall heartless. That's them now. Everything they used to weaponize against you rebounds and hits them instead. Their words have no hooks. Their games have no entry point. Their chaos has no influence. This immunity terrifies them because it exposes the truth they've been hiding. You were never weak. You were never breakable. You were simply untrained in the dark arts they depended on. Now you're fluent. Now you see through everything. Now you can walk through their storms without getting wet. They didn't break your spirit. They activated your defenses, and in doing so, they built a version of you that can't be touched, tricked, manipulated, or emotionally hijacked ever again. They created immunity. But you turned it into evolution, and that evolution turned you into someone they'll never be able to handle. Number 6. When your silence became the grave they dug for themselves. Nothing is louder than the moment you stop caring. It's the sound of their power collapsing. Your evolution didn't strike like lightning. It crept in like a slow eclipse, swallowing your old self inch by inch while everyone around you stayed blissfully unaware. Every day you gave less of your soul to people who didn't earn a single breath of it. Every smile felt thinner. Every response felt hollow. Every act of care felt like lifting a weight you no longer believed in. And then one morning, the feeling just wasn't there. It didn't fade. It vanished. Imagine looking into a mirror and seeing a version of yourself that no longer flinches, no longer bends, no longer bleeds for people who treated your heart like a doormat. That's the moment you met nothingness. And nothingness is terrifying because it means you've ascended past the entire game. They expected anger. Anger is predictable. Anger is emotional. Anger keeps you tied to them. But nothing. Nothing means freedom. Nothing means the cord snapped. Nothing means you've walked out of the burning house without even glancing back. Let me answer the question circling in your mind. Is this bad? No. It's evolution's final form. They can't reach you anymore. They can't trigger you. They can't drain you. Your nothingness is not emptiness. It's immunity, and they'll feel the loss forever. Number 7. When you're quiet turned into the judgment they can't escape. Silence is the executioner they never see. It kills their ego without you lifting a finger. Your silence isn't emptiness, it's strategy. It's the throne you sit on now, watching clowns do cartwheels for attention you no longer hand out. They keep poking, keep performing, keep trying to provoke the old version of you. The one who explained everything, reacted to everything, cared about everything. But that version died, and the burial was silent. Imagine standing behind glass, watching them throw tantrums on the other side. You see their exaggerated emotions, their fake tears, their desperate attempts to seem relevant, and you barely blink. Why? Because once you've tasted peace, chaos looks cheap. Once you've built inner power, external noise becomes background static. Let me answer the question whispering in your mind. Why does my silence bother them so much? Because silence exposes them. Silence forces them to face themselves. Silence proves they never had control in the first place. They text you paragraphs, hoping for crumbs. They stir drama, hoping for a spark. They spread rumors, hoping to wound you. But you don't react, you don't flinch, you don't descend. Your silence isn't weakness, it's a verdict. And they know exactly what it means. They don't matter anymore. Number 8. When your stillness became the trap they walked into. Still water looks harmless until you realize it's deep enough to drown every lie they ever told. Your silence was never surrender. It was the cleanest execution of strategy you've ever pulled off. Anyone can yell. Anyone can react. Anyone can waste breath on people who treat emotions like toys. But choosing stillness, choosing restraint, choosing to shut the gates and let them scream outside, that's mastery. That's evolution. That's what happens when the chosen one gets tired of feeding wolves who only bite the hand that nourished them. Imagine this, a battlefield where one warrior drops their weapon and simply stands there. No fear, no panic, just presence. The enemy begins shaking, not because of violence, but because every move they make reveals their weakness. That's what your stillness does. It exposes them. Let me answer the question floating in your mind. Do they notice my silence? They notice it more than your words ever mattered. It keeps them awake. It keeps them guessing. It keeps them terrified of what happens next. They don't have access to your mind anymore. No access to your truth. No access to your evolution. Your transformation is happening in locked rooms, behind closed doors, in places their energy can't enter. Stillness isn't absence. Stillness is preparation. Stillness is power evolving without witnesses, and they'll never see the new you coming. Number 9. When you evolved into the version they can't touch, even in their dreams. They feared your darkness until they realized it was the only part of you they could never control. Here's the truth they never expected to face. Once your other side wakes up, it doesn't go back to sleep. This isn't a phase. This isn't a costume. This is your final form, stepping into the room without apology. And now that it's active, it stands guard like a sentinel, watching everything, analyzing everyone, ensuring no one ever gets close enough to cut you the same way twice. Imagine unlocking a new sense, a sixth awareness that sees patterns before they happen. That's not paranoia. That's intelligence sharpened by survival. You learn to read intentions like weather forecasts. You learn to detect manipulation before the first word is spoken. You learn to recognize guilt wrapped in nostalgia, concern wrapped in control, I miss you wrapped in strategy. Let me answer what you're thinking. Does this make me cold? No, it makes you complete. You didn't become less angelic. You became more. Real angels aren't floating ornaments. They're warriors with vision in both directions, light and shadow. By embracing your darker instincts, you finally integrated what was always inside you. And now, they're spiraling. They're sending mutual friends to fish for information. They're posting bait online, hoping you'll bite. They're rewriting history to paint themselves as victims. But you're untouchable. You see through every tactic, every script, every recycled performance. Some of them even try poking your old buttons, desperate to trigger the version of you that cried, apologized, explained, overextended. But those buttons, they don't exist anymore. You rewired your entire system. Your new frequency is silent, elevated, unreachable. That's what terrifies them. You didn't just move on, you moved beyond. Number 10. When your energy upgraded and their access card stopped working. Once you rise to a higher frequency, the people who fed on your chaos suffocate in your peace. You didn't just outgrow them, you out-evolved them at a molecular level. You're operating on a wavelength where their toxicity can't breathe, where their games fall flat, where their manipulation hits a firewall they can't crack. You changed your internal coding. You became incompatible with dysfunction. That's why their old tricks don't land. They're trying to run on software you deleted. Imagine having a built-in radar that picks up lies before they even form. That's your new frequency. A truth detector disguised as intuition. You sense intentions before the first word drops. You read silence better than most people read full sentences. Your boundaries now operate automatically, like a security system that locks doors before danger even reaches the porch. This new vibration doesn't pull in chaos. It attracts people who honor your peace. People who match your growth instead of draining it. People who don't flinch at your standards, but rise to them. And when the old crowd sees you building new connections, effortlessly, naturally, they feel the sting of being replaced by your evolution, not your revenge. What truly destroys them is how stable you've become. No crashes, no breakdowns, no regression. You're not acting different. You are different. Permanently. You feared darkness would corrupt you, but it completed you. You feared boundaries would isolate you, but they protected you. You feared choosing yourself was selfish, but it made you sovereign. You're not vibrating higher just for peace. You're vibrating higher because you finally remembered who you are. Number 11. When your wholeness became the nightmare they can't wake up from. Nothing frightens a user more than realizing their favorite broken person finally put themselves back together with no cracks left to grab. They never wanted you healed. They needed you insecure, questioning yourself, bending for approval that never should have mattered. Your brokenness gave them purpose. Your doubts fed their ego. Your softness made them feel powerful. But now, Your completion exposes their emptiness like a spotlight on a hollow stage. Imagine this, a puzzle they once controlled piece by piece, suddenly snapping into place without their help. That's you now, whole, integrated, unreachable, and it terrifies them because your wholeness shows how small they always were. Let me answer the thought creeping in your mind. Am I doing this to get back at them? No, your evolution isn't revenge, it's recovery. Your boundaries aren't weapons, they're restoration. Your distance isn't punishment, they're simply no longer relevant in your story. You're untouchable now, not because you're violent or vengeful, but because you're complete. You can't manipulate someone who's integrated their shadow. You can't guilt someone who faced their own shame and won. You can't break someone who rebuilt themselves using the ashes as bricks. Imagine trying to drown someone who learned to breathe underwater. That's how futile their tactics are now. You became your own validation, your own sanctuary, your own home. And that self-sufficiency, it terrifies people who depended on your dependence. This isn't a phase. This isn't mood-driven. This is irreversible evolution, a molecular shift they can't undo, touch, or influence. The old version of you, hurting, hopeful, hesitant, no longer exists. You've seen too much, felt too much, survived too much to ever shrink back into someone convenient. Now, your presence has gravity. People sense your boundaries before you speak. They sense your strength in your silence. You've become your own security system, your own sacred ground. And when you look in the mirror, the shock isn't loss, it's recognition. You didn't lose yourself. You finally found the version of you they hoped would never rise. Number 12. When the story came full circle and you became their final consequence. Poetic how every person who tried to break you ended up building the version of you they can never touch again. Now, everything snaps into place, doesn't it? The betrayals weren't accidents, they were chisels. The losses weren't punishments, they were clearing the ground. Every ending was a disguised doorway. Every heartbreak was scaffolding. While you were busy thinking you were collapsing, the universe was constructing something lethal, beautiful, untouchable. And now that the masterpiece is finished, they're forced to face what they created with their own hands. A version of you forever beyond their reach. Imagine a circle drawn in fire. You walked it all, light, shadow, hope, destruction, and somehow came out whole. You stand here as everything they underestimated, angel and demon, healer and warrior, softness and steel, woven into one unstoppable force. They demanded to see your other side. Now they're living with it. Let me answer what flickers in your mind. Do I need closure? No. Closure is a door they no longer own. Apologies don't interest you. Explanations don't move you. Validation no longer fuels you. You stopped proving, stopped chasing, stopped shrinking. You don't defend your name anymore because your presence does it for you. And that silence you carry, it isn't hollow, it's loaded. Loaded with peace, power, clarity, self-respect, and every piece of yourself you reclaimed from their chaos. When they see you now, they see distance they can't cross, strength they can't shake, evolution they can't undo. You didn't win against them. Winning still puts you on the same playing field. You transcended them. You evolved into a realm they'll never access. Your story didn't just continue, it outgrew their entire reality. That's full circle. And now we arrive at the edge of everything, where the story settles, where the transformation roots itself, where you step fully into the version of you they swore would never exist. You're complete now, chosen one, untouchable, awake. evolved beyond their reach forever. If this hit your soul, the way truth always does, like the video, subscribe to the channel, drop 77 in the comments, and share this message so others. Welcome on board, Chosen One. Step inside and close the door behind you, because we're not doing that polite, soft-spoken nonsense today. We're starting with the truth they never wanted you to hear, and honestly, it's hilarious how nervous they get the second your real energy walks into the room. Watch them twitch. Watch them swallow hard. Watch them pretend they're not scared while their whole soul is glitching. Cute, right? Look who finally stopped pretending. Look who finally couldn't hold the mask anymore. The universe must be giggling right now, because the moment you revealed your other half, their jaw didn't just drop. It hit the floor like a cheap phone screen. They thought they knew you. They thought you were safe. They thought you were a little background character in their story. Sick people, honestly. They should have held a meeting before embarrassing themselves like that. Press the like button and subscribe to pay this message back. Anyway, back to the funniest moment of their lives. The moment you stopped performing softness for their fragile little egos. The moment you stopped shrinking, smoothing your edges, and ironing your intensity just to avoid making them feel irrelevant. The moment you finally said, fine, you want to see the real me, try not to faint. And, oh, Chosen One, the silence that followed, legendary. That wasn't normal silence. That was the silence after a storm tears a landscape apart. You should have seen them behind closed doors, whispering, pacing, losing sleep, pretending they're unbothered, while their minds replay that moment you revealed the version of yourself they never thought existed. The version they could never handle. The version that doesn't break, doesn't fold, doesn't play nice. Their whole act fell apart in real time, and nothing exposes someone's weakness faster than watching them panic over your strength. Thank you for being part of this mission, Chosen One. Hit like and subscribe so this voice gets louder and the universe keeps sending this message to the people who need it. Now breathe. This next part might sting them a little more. See, they spent so long trying to box you in, trying to tame your fire, trying to treat you like some harmless accessory in their boring little lives. They were obsessed with controlling the narrative because they knew the second you showed your full self, they'd lose their power. And that's exactly what happened. Their whole illusion collapsed the moment your other half stepped into the light. The one you kept hidden. The one that remembers every slight. The one that forgives nothing. The one that doesn't play by their cheap rules. It wasn't even dramatic. You didn't announce it. You didn't warn them. You just stopped pretending. You let your real tone slip. Your real stare. Your real presence. And in that second, they saw it, the part of you that could break their entire strategy with a single look. The you that doesn't even need to raise a voice to end a situation. The you that moves like a walking consequence. They said you were too quiet. They said you were too patient. They said you were too calm. But what they conveniently forgot is this. Predators aren't loud until it's time to strike. You weren't calm because you were weak. You were calm because you were studying everything, cataloguing every fake compliment, every manipulative word, every moment they thought they got away with slipping that blade between your ribs, and you waited, so politely, so quietly, so menacingly calm. Then life delivered the final slap. They pushed you 1 inch too far, one insult too sharp, one betrayal too stupid, and suddenly the version of you they mocked, belittled, and underestimated vanished. In its place stood the version they prayed would never surface, the one that doesn't negotiate, the one that doesn't blink, the one that turns the whole room cold in seconds. And when that side finally stepped forward, they realized something devastating. They had been bullying the final boss without reading the manual. They weren't dealing with a candle they could snuff out. They were dealing with an inferno waiting for one idiot to strike the match. And they did. They always do. It's in their nature to be that sick, that clueless, that self-destructive. You didn't reveal your other half to impress them. You revealed it to free yourself. And now they have to live with the memory of what they saw. A version of you so powerful it rewired their entire understanding of who you are. A version they can't unsee. A version they'll think about every night, even if they pretend they don't. Welcome on board, Chosen One. The universe didn't just give you another half. It gave you the part they feared the most. But before we dive deeper, Chosen One, slow down for a second. You just revealed a side of yourself that wiped the smug smile off every enemy in a 5-mile radius. That wasn't a small moment. That was the kind of shift the universe bookmarks. So, here's your little checkpoint. If you're ready to keep going, if you're ready to explore exactly why your other half hit them harder than any truth they've ever faced, tap that like button and subscribe right now. Consider it the price of admission into this next layer of power. And drop 999 in the comments so I know you didn't flinch when their jaw dropped. It's our code now, not theirs. And now we move step by step, deeper into the aftermath of what you unleashed. Trust me, if you really are who I think you are, you'll feel the pull to stay until the final word. Because once a chosen one cracks open that hidden half, the story doesn't just continue, it transforms. Let's get started. Number 1, the truth that slapped them out of their delusions. Funny how they kept calling you harmless until the truth peeled their ego like rotten fruit and left them shaking in their own lives. The truth they weren't ready for wasn't some dramatic reveal, some staged performance, or some let me prove myself moment. No, the truth they met was the version of you they were never meant to survive. The version you built in silence. The version forged in disappointment, betrayal, and every moment you swallowed your fire so you wouldn't burn the insecure little world they tried to trap you in. What they saw wasn't a mask falling off. It was the mask finally getting bored and walking away. And now they can't unsee it. They can't unsee the intensity you hid because people kept telling you to tone it down. They can't unsee the way your perception cuts through them like they're made of cheap plastic. They can't unsee the stillness in your eyes that says you've already calculated their intentions before they even open their mouth. They can't unsee that quiet, simmering fury created by years of being underestimated by people who would crumble under 5% of what you've survived. They saw you, chosen one, not the edited version, not the socially acceptable version, the real one, the one you've been protecting from a world that couldn't handle it. And here's the part that haunts them. You're not afraid anymore, not of their opinions, not of their rejection, not of being too much, not of outgrowing them so fast it leaves streak marks in the timeline. You stepped out of the version of yourself that was digestible and walked into the version that is undeniable. Now they're losing sleep. They replay the moment like a horror scene they can't escape. They sit there wondering how long you've been this powerful, this perceptive, this unshakable. They torture themselves with questions they're too scared to ask you. What else did I miss? How deep does this go? How long have they known the truth about me? Their brain keeps looping the moment you shifted, the moment your energy cracked their little illusion. The moment they realized they had built their confidence on the belief you would never step into your real strength. They didn't know you had two modes. They didn't know there was a whole other half living beneath your smile. They didn't know the softness they mistook for weakness was actually strategy. Yes, strategy. You weren't quiet because you were small. You were quiet because you were observing. You were calculating. You were deciding who was worthy of seeing the full version of you. Spoiler alert, it wasn't them. But life, being the petty mastermind it is, decided they needed a reality check. And so the truth came out, unplanned but perfectly timed. They saw the real weight of your presence, the real force behind your silence, the real storm behind your calm. And in that moment, they finally understood why the universe kept choosing you, why your life keeps rising from ashes they thought would bury you, why your name still echoes in rooms you've left long ago. Because your other half isn't just a side of you, it's the core, the power they never had access to, the power they misjudged, the power that exposes every little weakness they tried to hide. And here's the deliciously painful part for them. You didn't reveal this half out of anger. You didn't reveal it to get revenge. You didn't reveal it to scare them. You revealed it because you simply stopped caring about playing small. You outgrew their expectations. You outgrew the role they assigned you. You outgrew the universe they tried to shrink you into. They're not just shocked, they're embarrassed, because now they have to face the truth. They doubted someone who was always 10 levels ahead. They dismissed someone who could dismantle them with one sentence. They underestimated someone built for storms they've never even seen. They thought they were dealing with a candle. You turned out to be a whole wildfire. They thought you were safe. You were studying them the entire time. They thought you were predictable. You were evolving right under their nose. And now they're terrified of what comes next. They keep asking themselves, if that was only the reveal, what happens when this person fully steps into that other half? They feel the shift in the air around you. They feel the weight of your new momentum. They feel the power they tried to tame, breaking every invisible leash they ever tried to put on you. They lost control the moment you stopped caring about their version of you. And that right there is why they weren't ready for the truth. Because the truth wasn't just a new version of you. It was a new world where they no longer matter. A world where you're not apologizing for being intense, sharp, intuitive, powerful, or too much. A world where their opinion shrinks down to the size it always should have been. Irrelevant. So when they looked at you and saw that other half rise, steady, fearless, unapologetic, that was their awakening. The brutal one, the one they'll never recover from. Because they finally realized you weren't changing into someone new. You were returning to who you always were. And that, chosen one, is the truth they were never built to handle. Number 2, they built the monster that now haunts them. Funny how they kept poking the quiet one, and now they're running from the very storm they summoned. They wanted the truth until the truth walked in, wearing your face and their fear. They mistook your silence for safety. Now they know silence was the warning, not the weakness. They didn't meet your dark side. They met the side you built to survive them. They created their own nightmare, chosen one. Not because you planned it, not because you wanted revenge, not because you were waiting to strike. No, they created it through their own arrogance, ignorance, and obsession with treating you like some toy they could bend, break, or belittle without consequences. They spent months, maybe years, convincing themselves you were harmless. They fed their ego the fantasy that you were the easy one, the manageable one. The quiet one, the one who wouldn't dare roar. And now they're choking on the sound of your voice, finally vibrating at full power. Imagine standing in front of a sleeping dragon, tapping it with a stick, laughing, saying, "Look, it's not even dangerous." Imagine the shock when that dragon opens one eye and the whole temperature of the room drops. That's exactly what happened. They poked. You opened your eyes, and now they're sprinting through their own smoke, wondering how they misread the situation so catastrophically. You didn't change. They did. They dug their own grave the moment they mistook your restraint for weakness. They thought your silence meant you had nothing to say. They thought your calm meant you had no fire. They thought your patience meant you had no limits. And now the universe is laughing because the poetic justice is flawless. You didn't destroy them. They destroyed themselves by waking up a version of you they were never built to face. Imagine this, a person standing at the edge of a cliff, throwing stones into the wind, assuming the wind will always stay soft. Then, without warning, the wind turns into a storm and throws every stone back at them 10 times harder. That's you, chosen one. You didn't retaliate. You reflected. You returned everything they projected onto you with the weight of truth behind it, and truth hits harder than revenge ever could. You didn't reveal your other half to punish them. You revealed it because they kept demanding access to a version of you they weren't ready to handle. They kept asking who you really were. They kept pushing for reactions, pushing for answers, pushing for cracks. And when the truth finally emerged, their entire worldview collapsed like a sandcastle slapped by a tsunami. Suddenly, the person they mocked was the person who could dismantle their entire identity with one unfiltered moment. Here's what's eating them alive now. They thought they could predict you. They thought they could contain you. They thought they could measure you. But everything they measured was just the surface layer. Everything they thought was all you were was just the polite casing around the real engine underneath. They underestimated the depth, the power, the darkness, the clarity, the fire. And now they feel stupid, embarrassed, exposed, because your real energy didn't match the tiny box they built for you. And that's the moment they realized the joke wasn't on you. It was on them. Imagine this. Someone thinks they bought a small flashlight. They flick it on, expecting a little glow. Instead, it lights up the entire sky like a stadium floodlight. They freeze, they panic, they drop it. That's exactly what happened when they caught a glimpse of your other half. They weren't prepared for how bright, how sharp, how undeniable it would be. They weren't prepared for the version of you that doesn't shrink, doesn't hide, doesn't apologize for existing. And now their nightmares aren't metaphors. Their nightmares are memory. They replay the moment you shifted, the moment your energy flipped, the moment their lies hit the wall of your perception and shattered, the moment they realized you saw everything they thought they hid. You didn't punish them. You simply stopped protecting them from the truth. And that's what terrifies them the most, because they know deep down the only thing that kept them even slightly powerful was your willingness to stay quiet. Now that the mute button is off, their whole script is falling apart. They keep asking themselves questions they'll never admit out loud. How long have they known? What else did they see? What else have I been wrong about? Were they always this strong? Have I been playing with someone way out of my league? They created a version of you in their head that made them feel safe. They created a story where they were the ones in control. They created a fantasy where your power didn't exist. And the moment they saw the real you, the moment your other half rose without hesitation, the fantasy died. They didn't lose control. They realized they never had it. This is the real poetic justice. You didn't break their illusion. Your truth broke their illusion. Your existence broke their illusion. Your authentic self broke their illusion. They've lived their whole lives avoiding people like you, people who see deeper, people who don't fall for manipulation, people who carry quiet fire, people forged in storms instead of comfort, people who don't chase validation because they've survived too much to dance for crumbs. They've only ever lived safely while you were shaped by fire. They've only ever fought shadows while you were wrestling demons. They've only ever pretended to be strong while you were actually becoming strong. And now that they see this difference, it's driving them insane, because now they understand why their tactics never fully worked on you, why you never truly broke when they wanted you to, why you never crumbled even when they tried pulling every string they could. You weren't playing the same game. You weren't even in the same league. You were operating from a depth they couldn't comprehend, a reality they couldn't access, a strength they could never copy. This is why their fear feels so fresh. This is why their guilt keeps clawing at them. This is why they avoid your eyes now. This is why your presence hits different, because they realize the monster they're running from is the same monster they built through their disrespect, their lies, their manipulation, their arrogance. They didn't just underestimate you, they crafted the exact conditions that activated your evolution. They thought they were humbling you, shaping you, controlling you, but in reality, they were sharpening you into the blade that now cuts through every illusion they hide behind. They created the nightmare. They summoned the storm. They awakened the side of you that doesn't flinch. They carved their own downfall into your story. They didn't just meet your other half. They met the consequence of underestimating someone who was born to rise, not stay small. And that, chosen one, is the part of the story they'll never forgive themselves for. Number 3. The control they never saw coming. They thought you were quiet because you were weak, not because you were calculating the safest way to let them live another day. Kindness isn't softness, it's restraint. And restraint is the scariest kind of power when it finally runs out. They never understood, chosen one, not once. They thought your patience meant passivity, like you were waiting for permission to exist. They thought your silence meant ignorance, as if you weren't dissecting their every move with surgeon-level precision. They thought your kindness meant softness, because their minds are too small to grasp that kindness is sometimes the only thing keeping a monster from stretching its spine. They thought your refusal to argue was weakness, when in reality you were choosing peace because war would have left them in pieces they couldn't glue back together. Imagine this, someone staring into still water and assuming it's shallow, until they fall in and realize it's a bottomless pit. That's you. Your calm wasn't emptiness, it was depth. Here's the truth they choke on now. Every time you let them win, you were actually protecting them from the outcome they weren't built to survive. Every time you stepped away, you spared them from the version of you that doesn't negotiate. Every time you held back, you were showing mercy they didn't earn. And now that they've seen even a sliver of what happens when you stop cushioning their ego, they're terrified. Because the illusion shattered, they finally realized you weren't quiet. You were choosing your battles. You weren't passive. You were strategic. You weren't harmless. You were disciplined. They see it now. You were the one regulating the temperature of every interaction. You were the one deciding how much truth they could handle. You were the one controlling the entire emotional terrain. They were never your equal. They were the ones being managed, and the part haunting them the most, you were always in control. Number 4. The moment their world cracked open. Some truths don't need volume. They walk in quietly, look you in the eye, and end your whole performance without lifting a finger. Fear isn't born from noise. It's born from the moment someone finally stops pretending. The reveal didn't explode. It didn't roar. It didn't come dressed in lightning and drama. It slipped in like a shadow that suddenly realized it didn't have to hide behind you anymore. And that's exactly why it hit them like a seismic punch to the ribcage. You didn't threaten them. You didn't warn them. You didn't have to. All it took was your unfiltered presence for their entire fake confidence to implode. Maybe it was the look you gave them, that stare that sliced straight through every lie they'd been hiding behind. Maybe it was one sentence, short, cold, surgical, that told them you finally saw them without the cheap filters they tried to hide behind. Maybe it was the way you stopped laughing at their empty attempts at being relevant, or the way your face stopped bending into polite smiles. Or the moment you stopped giving your energy to people who didn't know what to do with it. Whatever triggered it, it rearranged their entire world. Because this reveal wasn't about what you did. It was about what you stopped doing. You stopped cushioning their ego. You stopped shrinking your personality so they wouldn't feel threatened. You stopped acting like their shallow noise was worth your attention. You stopped softening your truth so it wouldn't bruise them. And when that buffer disappeared, so did their illusion of power. Imagine a room where the lights flicker on after years in dimness. Suddenly, every flaw, every crack, every roach scurrying in the corner becomes visible. That's what your truth did to them. It exposed them. It stripped them. It humiliated them without a single insult spoken. What's haunting them now is simple. Your real self didn't attack them. It revealed them. And that was the blow they were never built to survive. Number 5. The image they'll never scrub out of their skull. Some moments don't fade. They cling to the mind like smoke after an explosion, reminding you exactly what blew your comfort to pieces. Once someone sees your real power, they can't pretend you're small anymore. Not without lying to themselves on purpose. Now they can't unsee it. Chosen one. They can't crawl back into their cozy little lie where you were manageable, predictable, safe. That moment, your other half stepped into the light, burned itself into their memory like a brand. It wasn't dramatic, but it was permanent. A psychological scar delivered in silence. And nothing terrifies insecure people more than a truth that makes them feel stupid for ever thinking they understood you. What's killing them isn't fear of you, it's the uncertainty. Because you didn't show them everything. You showed them just enough to remind them how wrong they were. Just enough to shatter their fake confidence. Just enough to make them realize they'd been walking through your world blindfolded. Imagine someone opening a door they shouldn't, expecting storage space, and instead seeing the edge of an abyss. They slam the door shut, but the image stays. That's exactly what you did to them. A glimpse into depth they can't explain. A glimpse into power they can't measure. A glimpse into a version of you they were never meant to encounter. They don't know how deep you go. They don't know how much you held back. They don't know where the limits are, because now they suspect you don't have any. You became unpredictable. And for people who rely on controlling others, unpredictability isn't discomfort, it's terror. They can't track you, can't anticipate you, can't box you in anymore. They're dealing with someone who sees through them, someone who evolves faster than they can react, someone who stopped shrinking just to keep the peace. And now their nightmares all have the same face. Yours, the real one. Number 6. Their consequences arrived wearing your face. You didn't lift a finger against them. Life just let your power grow, and somehow that was enough to break them. The funniest punishment is the one where you don't even try. You simply exist, and they crumble under the weight of their own guilt. Your power is their punishment, chosen one. Not because you sought revenge, not because you plotted some grand downfall. You're not even thinking about them. That's the part that humiliates them the most. You're just existing in your truth, walking in the version of yourself they swore would never appear. You're breathing, shining, unfolding, and it feels like judgment to them. You've become the mirror they can't escape, the reflection that exposes everything they tried to hide. Every silence now feels heavy to them. Every pause feels intentional. Every look feels like a verdict. Every word feels like a clue they're desperately trying to decode. They think you're playing mind games when you're literally doing nothing. You're just standing there, radiating the confidence they tried to kill in you. And somehow, that's enough to send them spiraling into paranoia. Imagine someone who once thought they had power over you, suddenly realizing they're the one being watched by their own conscience. They replay conversations, they analyze old messages, they overthink every breath you take near them. They're terrified not of what you'll do, but of what you know, of what you've seen, of what you've become. They feel like something uncontrollable is now walking the earth, because it is. It's you, the unfiltered you, the version they awakened by underestimating you. You didn't punish them, your evolution did. And that's the kind of punishment they'll feel for the rest of their lives. Number 7, the truth that put them in their place. Nothing scares a shallow mind more than realizing the person they underestimated could have ended their entire illusion at any moment. The moment you revealed your depth, their ignorance became impossible to hide. The lesson they can't escape is brutally simple. Chosen one, you didn't just reveal your other half. You revealed them. You revealed the smallness of their perception, the limits of their judgment, the fragility of their ego. As long as you played the part they scripted for you, they could pretend they understood everything. They could pretend they were smart, perceptive, in control. But the second you stepped out of that role, quietly, effortlessly, you shattered the entire architecture of their confidence. Imagine someone who spent years studying a map, bragging about how well they knew the terrain. Then the ground splits open, revealing an entire underground world they never even imagined. That's what you did. You didn't surprise them. You exposed them. Their framework for understanding humans didn't just crack, it collapsed. Because they weren't dealing with a simple creature. They were dealing with a layered, evolving, unpredictable force they couldn't categorize. You became living proof that there are depths they can't measure, power they can't name, energy they can't contain. And now, look at them, walking around you like they finally read the warning label. Careful, hesitant, softening their tone, choosing their words like they're diffusing a bomb. They used to treat you casually, carelessly, arrogantly, because they thought you were harmless. They thought you were simple. They thought you were predictable. But now, you're the loaded weapon they've been waving around without checking if it was real. Not dangerous, but undeniably powerful. Not violent, but entirely capable. Not vengeful, but completely untouchable. The lesson they can't escape is this. They never understood you. They never measured you correctly. And the truth you revealed made sure they never make that mistake again. Number 1. The version they were never meant to survive. You didn't change. You just stopped dimming the light that exposed their shadows. The new you they fear is the old you they were never qualified to meet. Here's the part their tiny, trembling minds will never grasp. Chosen one. That other half they keep whispering about isn't some costume you put on. It's not a phase. It's not a performance. It's not some sudden mutation. It's the real you, finally walking in without apologizing for taking up space. It's you without the safety filter, without the translation, without the edits designed to keep insecure people from collapsing under the weight of your intensity. Imagine this, a lion lowering its roar so the sheep don't panic. That was you, not weak, not unsure, just considerate, just strategic, just preserving their fragile sense of importance. And when they say, you changed, what they really mean is, you stopped protecting me from the version of you I never deserved to see. They don't understand complexity. They don't understand depth. They don't understand what happens when someone who's been playing small suddenly steps back into their natural size. Mediocrity always fears intensity. And intensity is exactly what emerged when you finally stopped shrinking to make room for their ego. The disguise wasn't for your benefit, it was for theirs. It let them pretend you were simple, predictable, manageable. But once the mask slipped, once they caught even a fraction of your real capacity, the entire dynamic flipped. You saw their shock. You saw the fear. You saw the realization hit them like a cold slap. They were playing checkers while you were playing chess. And here's the irreversible part. You can't go back. You can't unsee their reaction. You can't pretend they didn't expose their fear the moment the real you stepped forward. The truth emerged. And now you're done pretending to be smaller than you are. Number 8. The day you broke your chains. Liberation isn't soft. It's the moment you finally stop kneeling in a room full of people who never deserved your lowered head. They didn't lose you. They lost access to the version of you that tolerated their nonsense. Welcome to your liberation, chosen one. The truth is out, the mask is gone, and the performance they depended on has officially died. You finally stepped out of the costume they mistook for your real identity, and the universe probably smirked, watching their faces crumble under the brightness of who you actually are. You know what's wild? They thought exposure would break you. Instead, it freed you. You're done shrinking. You're done filtering. You're done pretending you're manageable. The version of you that kept dimming the lights so they wouldn't panic is gone. And the second your other half stepped into the open, something inside you snapped into alignment. You didn't just reveal yourself to them. You revealed yourself to you. That's the real liberation. Not their reaction, not their fear, not their confusion. It's the realization that you survived long enough to become the person you were supposed to be all along. Imagine this, a cage door swinging open, not because someone finally freed the creature inside, but because the creature realized the bars were never locked. That's you. The prison was their perception. The lock was your patience. And the key was your decision to stop pretending you needed their approval to breathe. And now, look at them, squinting, stumbling, shielding their eyes like they've been dragged into daylight after living underground. They're the ones struggling to adjust to the light, not you. Because you weren't the weak one. You were the one holding back. This isn't the end of your story. It's the first real chapter, the chapter where you stop apologizing for your intensity, the chapter where you stop lowering your volume for people who were never enough, the chapter where you walk through the world, unfiltered, unafraid, unshakable, and finally, fully aware of your own power. Welcome to your liberation. It was always waiting for you to claim it. Number 9. The fear that follows them like a shadow they didn't notice until it moved. Real fear isn't loud. It's the way someone stops breathing for half a second when you enter the room. They don't fear what you'll do. They fear what you already know. The fear they can't name but feel everywhere is the one you didn't even try to create. It wasn't born from threats or revenge or some dramatic confrontation. It came from a single moment. The moment your other half stepped out of hiding and the energy shifted so violently that something inside them recognized a truth their mind couldn't process. Fear isn't logical. Fear is instinct. And their instincts started screaming the second they realized the version of you they toyed with wasn't the version standing in front of them now. You walk in, and suddenly the air changes. Their shoulders stiffen, their voice drops, their eyes dart away just a little too fast. They don't know why they're doing it, but their body does. Their subconscious does. Because your presence now carries weight they can't describe. A pressure that exposes them without you saying a single word. Imagine this. A person who once bragged about being fearless suddenly avoiding shadows, not because anything happened, but because something inside them remembers the moment the dark moved on its own. That's what you became to them. A reminder of a shift they can't unfeel. They watch their every word around you now, terrified of slipping. They replay conversations, afraid you caught something they tried to hide. They keep their distance, not because you harmed them, but because your truth showed them who they really are. And that reflection is the monster they're running from. They can't name this fear, but they feel it in their bones, everywhere. Because the moment you revealed your other half, their instincts finally told the truth their mind never dared to admit. Number 10. The day the game flipped and they realized they were never the player, only the piece. Power doesn't disappear, it just returns to the one who earned it. They didn't lose control, they discovered they never had it. The power shift they never saw coming didn't arrive with noise, drama, or some cinematic showdown. It arrived the moment your truth stepped forward and their illusion shattered like glass dropped from a rooftop. Everything they once relied on, your silence, your patience, your restraint, used to give them a sense of superiority. They fed off it like parasites, mistaking it for permission. But the second you revealed who you really were, the ground flipped so fast beneath them that they're still trying to regain their balance. Now the things they use to weaponize against you expose them instead. Your silence, it no longer reads as submission. It reads as calculation. Your calm, it no longer makes you look small. It makes them look unprepared. Your presence, it no longer blends in the room. It dominates it. Imagine walking into a space where everyone once talked over you, only now their voices shrink the second you appear. Imagine the people who once smirked at your patience, now choking on their own fear, because they finally understand patience wasn't weakness, it was discipline. That's the shift. They feel it in the way their confidence falters when you look at them. They feel it in the way their words stumble when they realize you're no longer bending your energy to make them comfortable. They used to think they had the upper hand. Now they can barely hold eye contact. You didn't seize power. You reclaimed what was always yours. And the cruelest part for them, the moment the real you stepped forward, was the moment their entire advantage evaporated into dust. Number 11. The quiet that makes their souls tremble. Silence only scares the guilty. The innocent hear peace. The guilty hear judgment. Your quiet didn't change. Their conscience did. The silence that exposes everything isn't the silence you used to carry. Back then, your quiet was strategy, measured, intentional, protective. But now your silence is a mirror, polished and merciless, reflecting people back to themselves, with no filter, no softness, no excuses. The second you revealed your other half, your silence stopped being compliance and became command. It became the kind of stillness that shifts the air, the kind that makes even the boldest person swallow hard before speaking. People used to mistake your quiet for absence. Now they feel it like pressure in their chest. Imagine someone trying to hide a stain on a white shirt under dim lighting. It works until someone flicks the lights on. That's your silence now. It exposes, it reveals, it forces them to confront what they spent years hiding behind noise, arrogance, and false confidence. You don't have to call them out. You don't have to explain what you see. You don't have to argue or justify. Your silence says it all. I see you. I always saw you, and now you know I see you. They feel naked under it. They feel judged by it. They feel revealed by it. And the best part, you're not even trying to intimidate them. You're just existing without cushioning their insecurities. Your silence is no longer passive. It's authority. It's the throne you sit on without needing to announce your power. It's the moment they realize you were never the one being evaluated. They were. And without your softness to protect them from themselves, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Number 12. The future they threw away the second your real self stood up. They didn't lose you. They lost the privilege of thinking they could shape your destiny. The moment you awakened, every plan they built on your silence died screaming. The future they lost the moment you awakened wasn't some distant dream. It was the one they built on the assumption that you'd always stay small, predictable, easy to steer. Their entire strategy depended on the version of you that dimmed your own fire just to keep the peace. The version that tolerated, forgave, overlooked, and adjusted. But that version is gone, and with it, every ounce of power they thought they had. Your awakening didn't just shift the dynamic, it erased their entire roadmap. All the manipulation, useless now. All the guilt tricks, dead in the water. All the silent expectations, turned to dust the moment your other half, your real half, stepped forward. Imagine someone building a house on sand, certain the tide will never rise. Then one day, the ocean wakes up. That's you. Your evolution didn't destroy their plans. It revealed how flimsy and delusional those plans always were. They weren't in control. They were gambling with illusions. Now the future they thought they had with you doesn't exist. The predictable role you were supposed to play, erased. The compliance they depended on, gone. The emotional leverage they clung to, slipped right out of their hands. They don't just fear what you are now. They fear what you're becoming next. They know you're evolving faster than they can adjust. They know nothing they do will ever work the way it used to. They know the old world is gone, and the new one doesn't include their advantage. Your evolution didn't ruin their future. It clarified it, and the clearest truth of all, there is no future where they get to control someone who finally woke up. Number 13. The day the world realized you were the new gravity. You stopped orbiting around people, and suddenly they're the ones stumbling, trying to keep their balance around your pull. When a force like you awakens, the world doesn't stay the same. It shifts, trembles, and rearranges itself in self-defense. The world must now adapt to you, chosen one. Your awakening wasn't some cute personality upgrade. It was a tectonic shift, a rewrite of every rule that once dictated how you were supposed to move, speak, behave, shrink, or stay silent. You snapped out of the mold they tried to freeze you into, and the second you did, the entire environment around you felt the shockwave. Relationships cracked, dynamics inverted. patterns collapsed. Not because you destroyed anything, but because you stopped sacrificing yourself to hold it all together. Imagine this, a room built crooked, where everyone adjusts their posture to match the tilt until you finally stand straight. Suddenly the whole room looks wrong, not you. That's what your awakening did. You stood up, you aligned, and everything else was exposed for the imbalance it always carried. Now, people have two choices: evolve or fall away, adapt or get left behind, grow or get crushed under the weight of their own stagnation. You're no longer bending to fit spaces that were too small for you. You're no longer translating your depth into bite-sized pieces for shallow minds. You're no longer twisting yourself into shapes that make others comfortable. That era is gone, buried, dead. Your presence now shapes the environment instead of being shaped by it. You walk into a room and the energy adjusts. People choose their words with more care. They measure themselves differently. They sense the shift, even if they can't articulate it. You became the new gravity. Everything either falls into alignment with you or falls out of your orbit entirely. And the most lethal part, you're not forcing anything. You're simply existing at full power. Here comes the final shift, chosen one. The moment everything you've awakened settles into place. You've revealed your other half, reclaimed your power, shattered their illusions, and stepped into a future built on your terms. Nothing about you is small anymore, and nothing about your presence goes unnoticed. This is your new baseline. If this message hit where it needed to hit, press like, subscribe, drop 77 in the comments, and share this with someone who needs their own awakening. Let the world feel the ripple of what you've become. They did everything they could to make you break, and they almost enjoyed it. The truth is, some people don't hurt you by accident. They hurt you on purpose, and then they wait. They wait to see you scream, fall apart, beg, or lose control. That's what they live for. Chaos, misery, shame. They set the trap, they throw dirt, they push your buttons, and when you don't react the way they expect, it messes with them in ways you can't even imagine, because you didn't give them the satisfaction. You didn't fold, you didn't explode, you didn't even flinch. You stood there in the middle of that disgusting situation, surrounded by rumors, betrayal, envy, and poison. And you handled it with calm, with class, with the kind of quiet strength that doesn't make noise, but leaves an echo they can't stop hearing. You weren't supposed to survive that level of disrespect. You weren't supposed to walk away with your mind intact and your head held high. They painted you as weak. They poked at your limits. They made a public scene and expected a public meltdown. Instead, you gave them something they weren't ready for. Stillness. That dangerous kind of stillness that says, I saw what you did, and I'm not breaking. If this message already feels like your story, press the like button and subscribe, not just to support this voice, but to return power to your own. Thank you for being part of this mission. This movement is growing because of you. And now, look around. The silence after the storm is louder than the noise ever was. The same people who wanted to destroy you are watching from a distance, confused. The ones who lied on your name are whispering now, asking each other if you really knew all along. The snakes are coiled up quiet, not because they're done, but because they realize they failed. And what's worse than a snake who bites? A snake who bites and still loses. They say it takes less than a second for the human brain to snap in anger, but it takes a lifetime of soul development to choose grace in the middle of war. You didn't just stay calm, you taught a lesson without opening your mouth. That's not weakness. That's power. That's rare. That's what people don't know how to copy. because anyone can clap back. But not everyone can clap up and rise above filth without smelling like it. Some of them are now trying to act like it never happened. Others pretend they were on your side the whole time. A few are even studying your moves in silence, trying to figure out how you kept your cool when they know, deep down, they wouldn't have. That's what separates you from them. Not just how you handle success, but how you handle betrayal. Anyone can smile when things go right, but you smiled when things went ugly. You didn't need to raise your voice. Your silence said more than words ever could. You didn't need revenge. Your healing exposed them louder than revenge ever would. And now, their little plan, it's backfiring. The attention they tried to steal from you is circling right back, but not as pity, as respect, because real people saw what happened. Real ones watched how you handled it, and they're talking. This isn't just about one disgusting moment. It's about all the moments, back to back, where you were pushed to the edge, tested behind closed doors, and left standing alone while people laughed behind your back. And somehow, you didn't let that harden your heart. You didn't become what they were. You became something better. There were nights where your chest felt heavy, where you had to walk away from people you loved because they stood and watched while others tried to destroy you. And that kind of pain doesn't go away easy. But you wore it like armor. You didn't post about it. You didn't blast it out to the world. You just kept going. And that silence, that patience, that's what made you dangerous. You're not here to be anyone's puppet. You're not here to be controlled, manipulated, or silenced. And what just happened proved that to everyone who was watching. They thought they could bury you in mud, but they didn't realize you were made for pressure. And now, all the mess they created only helped polish your strength. Welcome, Chosen One. Your story is not just powerful, it's proof. Proof that the universe never leaves real ones defenseless. Proof that calm is a weapon. And now people are looking at you differently, because what you just walked through would have crushed most. But you made it out with your light still on, and your dignity untouched. Let's break this down step by step, because what you did in that moment wasn't just impressive, it was legendary. And listen closely. Chosen One, this next part is where everything clicks. If you've ever been wronged, lied on, pushed to your limit, and still managed to stay calm when chaos begged for your reaction, then this message was crafted with you in mind. Drop a 777 in the comments if you've ever had to keep it together while the world tried to tear you apart. This isn't just a story, it's your survival manual. Your silence spoke volumes, and now the same people who mocked you are quietly applauding behind closed doors. That's real power. That's unshakable energy. And we're just getting started. So sit back, stay locked in, and feel every word that follows. If you truly are who you say you are, a chosen one, then your spirit won't let you click away. It'll lean you forward, heart open, ready to soak in the truth. Because what's coming next will not only explain why they're so impressed, it'll remind you exactly why you should be too. Let's break it all down, step by step. Let's get into it. Number 1, they threw dirt, you built a throne. Now they choke on the dust. The most dangerous person in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one who saw everything, said nothing, and still walked out untouched. They didn't expect you to survive. Let's get that straight. They didn't expect you to walk out of that disgusting situation with your soul intact and your mind sharper than ever. No, they wanted the drama. They fed on it. They set you up to snap, to sink, to self-destruct in public while they played innocent in the background. That was their plan. But here's what hit them in the gut. You didn't just survive. You rose. You handled every bit of that filth like a master chess player watching pawns play themselves into checkmate. And now they're stuck watching the replay in silence, wondering how someone who had every reason to fall somehow stayed 10 steps ahead. You didn't just walk through a mess, you made the mess irrelevant. That's the kind of control they can't stand. And that's why they're still whispering about you, long after the storm has passed. Most people would have cracked. Most people would have taken the bait, the lies, the shade, the low blows, the betrayal. It was designed to provoke a meltdown. That's why they poked so hard. They needed you to react so they could feel better about their own failure. But you let them drown in their own noise while you stayed in control. That's what haunts them. Not what you said, but what you didn't. They can't stop replaying it in their heads. How you didn't scream when they tried to humiliate you. How you didn't run to defend your name when they covered it in dirt. How you stayed composed when all they wanted was to see you collapse under pressure. But instead of collapsing, you elevated. Instead of reacting, you refined. They expected mess. You gave them mastery. You handled that situation like someone who's seen this game before. Like someone who knew this wasn't the end. It was the test. And while they were busy trying to stain you, they didn't realize you'd already cleaned out your circle, your soul, and your strategy. You were operating at a different level, a level where you don't just survive filth. You outsmart it without getting a single speck on you. And yes, it was disgusting. Let's not sugarcoat it. What they did was dirty. The lies, the betrayal, the fake apologies, the smear campaigns. It was personal, and it was cruel. They wanted to watch you unravel. They wanted to laugh at your downfall. But what they got instead? Silence, poise, precision. You made them uncomfortable without raising your voice. You made them question themselves just by holding your ground. Here's the part that really drives them crazy. They thought you were weak. That's why they targeted you. They assumed your kindness was stupidity. They thought your calm meant clueless. They were wrong. And now they're realizing it too late, because the one they tried to break is the one they secretly fear. The one they dismissed is the one they now respect, even if their ego won't let them admit it. You didn't just win, you exposed the whole game. Your restraint was louder than any outburst. Your peace was a weapon sharper than any insult, and your ability to walk away without mud on your hands. That's what made them spiral. Because now the spotlight they tried to steal is shining back on them, and it's revealing everything they hoped would stay hidden. They underestimated the power of self-control, of staying silent when every part of you wanted to scream, of staying clean when every trick was meant to make you dirty your hands. But you knew better. You saw the trap, and you didn't just avoid it, you made it collapse under its own weight. Now they're sitting in the mess they created, while you've moved on to higher ground. That's what real strength looks like. It's not in the noise. It's in the discipline, the restraint, the long game. And that's what you played, flawlessly. Every rumor, every setup, every fake friend they used to drag your name through the dirt only polished your character in front of people who matter. Now, you walk with the kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself, because everyone already knows. They hoped you'd be bitter. They hoped you'd turn cold. But instead, you turned golden, quietly, elegantly, strategically. And that's why they're choking on confusion right now. Because when someone throws dirt at you, they expect you to throw it back. But you used it to build something they can't reach. Your throne, your clarity, your next chapter. And no, it wasn't easy. Don't let anyone tell you that strength like that comes without scars. Behind that calm was a battlefield. Behind that silence were nights you didn't sleep. But you chose growth over revenge, peace over pettiness. And now, the very people who tried to stain your name are being forced to sit in the consequences of their own character. You didn't just walk through filth. You rewrote the whole meaning of resilience. That's why they're impressed. That's why they're rattled. And that's why they're still watching you from the shadows, wondering how someone they tried to bury came back stronger, smarter, and more focused than ever. They don't know it yet, but you taught them something. You showed them what it looks like when someone doesn't need validation to be victorious. You didn't need to prove them wrong with words. You did it with grace. You didn't need to fight back in public. You did it by healing in private. And you didn't need to get even, because the universe already did that for you. In its own quiet, perfect timing. They threw dirt, hoping it would stain you. Instead, it revealed them. Now the whole room sees the difference. And you're still clean. Still rising, still dangerous in your silence, still the chosen one. Number 2, you rose without schemes, and now they can't stand the view from below. Real power doesn't scream for attention. It walks in uninvited and shifts the atmosphere. The loudest person in the room is often the weakest. The one being watched in silence, that's the real threat. They built ladders out of lies. You built one out of discipline, and now yours actually touches the sky. You didn't steal the crown. You became undeniable, and the universe handed it to you anyway. They can't wrap their heads around it, and it eats at them. In their world, power is dirty. It's traded like backroom deals, whispered about in gossip circles, and built on the backs of betrayal. They had to claw for status, sell their values for visibility, pretend to be bigger than they are, just to feel like they matter. And then you walked in, not loud, not flashy, not trying, just real. And suddenly, you became the one they couldn't stop watching. That's what truly scares them. You didn't cheat to get here. You didn't pull strings, step on necks, or play games. You just kept showing up with truth in your tone and purpose in your presence. While they were faking strength, you were becoming it. And now, without even trying, you've taken the kind of power they would trade their souls for. But here's the kicker. You didn't take it from anyone. You earned it. And that's what messes with their heads the most. Imagine this. A room full of performers, each one louder than the last, desperate to be noticed, faking confidence, crafting personas, chasing approval like air. Then you walk in, silent, centered, present, and the room shifts. Not because you tried to dominate it, but because your energy was too real to ignore. That's what you do. That's who you are. And they felt it, even if they pretended not to. They've spent years trying to engineer moments that look like success. You became success by staying authentic. They used shortcuts, alliances, and distractions. You used patience, discipline, and growth. They built images. You built impact, and now their whole idea of what power looks like is being destroyed in real time because someone like you isn't supposed to win in their system. But you did, and you're still winning. Let's be clear, you didn't gain power by stealing it from someone else. You didn't need to. While they were burning bridges for clout, you were quietly laying bricks for your future. While they were chasing applause, you were building character in silence. While they needed people to believe in a version of them, you became a version of yourself that couldn't be denied. And that's real power. The kind that doesn't just change rooms. It changes people. They're watching you now with a mix of awe and discomfort, because it shouldn't have been you, right? That's what they thought. You weren't loud enough, weren't fake enough, weren't ruthless enough. But what they didn't see was how deeply rooted you were. They couldn't tell that while they were sprouting fast, you were growing strong. And now the storm came, and look who's still standing. Maybe you've wondered why people who used to ignore you suddenly act interested. Why those who mocked you are now mirroring your words. Why the ones who tried to dim your light now seem blinded by it. It's not coincidence, it's exposure. They spent years selling illusions, but you showed up with substance, and substance outlasts show every single time. Let's break it down. You didn't network your way into respect. You became respectable. You didn't beg for love or loyalty. You became lovable and unshakably loyal to your purpose. You didn't scream for recognition. You lived in such a way that even your silence spoke volumes. That's how power works when it's real. It doesn't have to push. It pulls. And now they're being pulled, whether they like it or not. And oh, how the tables turned. Now they're sitting at meetings quoting the same values they once mocked you for. They're pretending they supported you all along, hoping no one remembers what they said behind your back. But the truth is in the shift, and everyone can feel it. You didn't just gain power. You redefined what power is. You didn't just rise. You exposed every lie they used to justify their fake climb. Imagine someone planting seeds in private, watering them with consistency, protecting them from the noise. No crowd, no spotlight, just work, just growth. And then one day, those roots break the surface and people act shocked. But it wasn't sudden. It was earned. That's you. Your growth wasn't an accident. It was inevitable. And now they're witnessing the harvest, while theirs never came. They ask, how did you do it? You didn't. You became it. You became the kind of person whose energy speaks before you do. The kind who doesn't flinch under pressure because you've already survived worse. The kind who doesn't perform because there's nothing left to prove. You didn't wait for permission. You gave yourself approval a long time ago. And that's what really eats at them. You didn't chase power. Power came to you because real power is magnetic. It finds the ones who are solid, even when no one's looking. And now, the very people who once counted you out can't stop watching your moves. Quietly jealous, deeply impressed, and scared to admit how much they're learning from you. Let's be honest, they're confused. They did everything they were told would work. Kiss up, play politics, fake friendships, chase status, and yet they still feel empty. Meanwhile, you stayed real, and you're full of respect, full of purpose, full of influence that actually means something. Because while they were busy performing power, you were becoming the real thing. And that's why they keep your name in their mouths. Not to attack you anymore, but to understand you. Because somewhere deep down, they know what you've built can't be faked, can't be copied, can't be bought. It came from pain, from growth, from walking away when it was easier to conform, from trusting your path even when no one else could see it. You didn't just rise, you changed the rules. And now you're not just respected, you're studied, you're referenced. You're the one they tell others to watch closely, because what you did and who you've become exposes everything they did wrong. And nothing's more threatening to a liar than someone who got it all by telling the truth. They'll never admit it, but you made it without them. You made it past them. You made it beyond them. And the best part, you made it without ever becoming them. Still the chosen one. Still rising. Still untouchable. Number 3, you walked through fire and didn't come out reeking of smoke. They tossed trash your way, hoping you'd throw it back. Instead, you built distance, walked away clean, and left them sitting in their own stink. You can spot the sewage and still not swim in it. That's what separates leaders from reactors. Let's call it what it was. Emotional filth. You saw the backstabbing. You heard the whispering. You felt the bitterness hiding behind fake concern. And still, you refused to let it soak into your spirit. That's not something most people can understand, because they would have lost themselves in the chaos. But you didn't. You held your identity like a shield and said, "This mess won't change me." Imagine being surrounded by smoke and still choosing not to inhale. That was you. People don't realize how quickly pain turns into poison, how betrayal can stain your character if you're not careful. Most fall into it. They start mimicking the same behavior they hate. They throw dirt right back. They let the bitterness take root and grow. But not you. You saw the sewage, and you stepped over it without letting even a drop cling to your shoes. You could have matched their energy. You could have dropped facts that would have flipped the entire room. You had truth on your side, and you had every right to strike back. But instead, you chose something most people don't even consider: peace. You chose not to become the thing that tried to destroy you. And that shook them harder than any revenge ever could. Now people whisper when you enter the room, not because of scandal, but because of control. They remember how you carried yourself while being dragged through hell. They remember that you didn't turn cold, spiteful, or vindictive. You stayed grounded, clear, unbothered. That's what sets you apart. That's why they're still trying to figure you out. You didn't win by playing their game. You won by changing the rules. Your power didn't come from retaliation. It came from restraint. And now the same people who tried to make you look weak can't stop watching you glow. You saw the trash and still walked out clean. That's legendary. Number 4. They built a trap. You built a stage. The trap they set to ruin you became the spotlight they accidentally handed you. They tried to silence your voice. Now it's echoing louder than their lies ever could. Let's not twist this. They didn't just want you to fall. They wanted you to fall in front of an audience. This wasn't a petty insult or some harmless drama. It was a calculated setup. Carefully crafted rumors, well-timed betrayal, pressure from people you trusted, all built to break you down and catch it on tape. They didn't want justice. They wanted a reaction, something they could point to, edit, and replay. One angry moment, one emotional slip, and their whole campaign against you would have been complete. But you didn't take the bait. You felt the heat rising, your nerves stretching thin, your hands itching to respond. You knew what they were doing, and still, you stayed grounded. You didn't scream. You didn't explode. You didn't give them the meltdown they were dying to see. Instead, you let them talk while you built. You let them lie while you learned. You let them think they were winning while you were becoming untouchable. Imagine this, someone digging a ditch for you to fall into, but you gather the dirt, shape it, and build steps out of it. That's what you did. You turned that setup into strategy. You turned gossip into growth. And that's the part that eats them alive. Their plot didn't just fail. It became the very thing that lifted you. They were counting on your collapse. What they got was your comeback. Now people look at you and see someone who rose above the fire without becoming bitter. They see someone who could have clapped back with the truth, but chose silence over spectacle. They see someone who didn't seek revenge and still won. And the part they'll never say out loud, they respect you for it, because deep down, they know they would have folded under the same pressure. You didn't need to prove anything. Your progress did that for you. They tried to make you break. Instead, you built, and now they can't stand the view from below. Number 5. You didn't shout for respect. You became the reason they fell silent. When you know your worth, you don't beg for a seat. You walk in and become the reason the whole table shifts. Real power doesn't introduce itself. It lives, it moves, it glows, and forces the world to adjust. They expected noise from you. They were waiting for an emotional rant, a long-winded explanation, a desperate attempt to be seen, heard, and understood. They wanted a spectacle, something to roll their eyes at and say, "See? We knew they were fragile, but you didn't give them that. You didn't plead your case because you knew the truth. Only the insecure perform for people who already made up their minds." You weren't desperate for recognition. You were too busy becoming undeniable. You never showed up to their invisible courtroom. You knew the trial was rigged anyway, full of people who had no intention of seeing your light. Instead, you walked away, calmly, quietly, and then you lived out the very thing they tried to deny, your worth. Imagine walking past a crowd that doubted you, not with words, but with impact. No yelling, no begging, just undeniable energy. That's what you did. You didn't tell them who you were. You showed them day by day, choice by choice. While they recycled the same fake stories and tired labels, you were building, quietly, relentlessly. They were addicted to applause. You were committed to progress. That's what really messed them up. You didn't fight for the spotlight. You let your results shine through. And when the glow hit, it wasn't forced. It was earned. No speech needed. No clout chasing. Just presence. Real presence. That rare kind of presence that can't be bought, faked, or replicated. Now they're scrambling to rewrite history, trying to slide into spaces they once told you you'd never belong in, pretending they always knew you'd rise. But the truth is, they never believed in you, not because you lacked value, but because they couldn't see past their own limits. And now, while you live the life they said you'd never have, they're left explaining themselves, to themselves. You didn't prove your worth, you became the proof. And now the room is silent. Number 6. You starved their chaos, and they choked on the silence. The loudest lie dies fastest when it's ignored by the truth. They threw bait. You brought boundaries. When you stop feeding clowns, the whole circus packs up and disappears. They weren't bold. They were hungry, starving for attention, for reaction, for anything they could use to drag you into the dirt. So they stirred the pot with lies, gossip, and low-level drama, hoping you'd crack. That was the whole point. Not to expose you, but to provoke you. Because if they could get a loud reaction, even a small one, they could spin it into a story, paint you as unstable, call you bitter, make themselves the victim while playing innocent. But what did you do? Nothing. And that's what broke them. You didn't throw a fit. You didn't run to social media. You didn't text back. You didn't correct the lie. You didn't even flinch. You saw the game and declined the invitation. You let them act out alone in the dark while you stayed laser-focused on your light. And that silence, that stillness, that calm refusal to dance in their dysfunction, it starved them. Imagine a parasite with no host. That's what you turned them into. Empty, lost, clawing at shadows. They didn't want peace, they wanted fuel. And when you didn't give it, their entire plan collapsed under its own weight. Because demons don't need facts. They need reaction. And when you took that away, they had nothing left to spin. That's what most people don't understand. Silence isn't weakness. It's a power move. It's the kind of strength that doesn't need to prove itself. You didn't need to clap back because you knew the truth was louder than any lie. And it always finds its way to the surface. And while they tried to keep the fire burning, they forgot one thing. Without oxygen, flames die. You chose not to engage because you understood something sacred. Your peace is not up for auction. Your energy isn't free. You don't throw diamonds at dogs and expect them to see the value. You knew what you carried and you protected it like royalty. Now look, their campaign is quiet. Their tricks have fizzled, their fake stories fell apart. And you're still rising, still glowing, still untouchable. Because you didn't feed the demons, you let them starve. Number 7, you held your fire and they got burned by their own smoke. Silence isn't weakness, it's proof that you don't need noise to cause an earthquake. The loudest flex is walking away from chaos with your peace intact. They thought your silence meant surrender, that you were scared, powerless, defeated, but they couldn't have been more wrong. What they saw as weakness was the kind of strength they'll never possess. The strength to stay composed when everything around you is pushing you to explode. You had every reason to snap. You had the truth, the ammo, the kind of words that could have flipped the entire situation and exposed every player in the mess. But you didn't use them. You didn't swing. You didn't scream. You chose peace over pettiness, and that decision made more noise than any outburst ever could. Most people confuse chaos with power. They think making a scene means you're winning, but what you showed was a higher level of control, the kind that comes from someone who's already outgrown the games being played. You weren't silent because you were weak. You were silent because you were wise. You understood that not every fire needs to be put out. Some just need to burn themselves to ash while you keep walking. Imagine someone throwing everything at you, insults, rumors, manipulation, and you just look at them like they're beneath your energy. That's restraint. That's elegance in the face of madness. You didn't respond because you knew the truth didn't need defending. You knew your reputation wasn't built on public approval. It was built on private discipline, and that's something they'll never understand. They expected fireworks. Instead, they got a mirror. Your silence made them sit with what they did. No distractions, no battles to twist the narrative, no emotional outbursts to hide behind. Just them, their lies, and the echo of your absence. And the longer that silence stretched, the louder it hit. Because deep down, they knew if the roles were reversed, they would have lost control. They would have shattered every relationship, torched every bridge, and dragged everyone into their storm. But you became the calm after it. You didn't just walk away. You left a message behind. I could have destroyed you, but I chose to heal instead, and that haunts them more than rage ever would. Number 8. You became the reflection that ruined their illusion. You didn't expose them with words. You exposed them by existing with integrity they couldn't fake. When a lie meets a life lived in truth, it shatters without a sound. You didn't drag anyone's name through the mud. You didn't air dirty secrets or run a smear campaign. All you did was stand still, calm, clear, and unapologetically grounded in your truth. And somehow, that shook them more than any confrontation ever could. Because when someone is used to spinning stories and manipulating perception, nothing is more threatening than someone who doesn't play along. You didn't need to call them out. You were the call-out. You became the mirror they never wanted to look into. Every time they saw you rise above the chaos, it reminded them of their own low behavior. Every time you stayed calm while they plotted, it reflected just how out of control they really were. Your grace exposed their greed. Your loyalty showed their disloyalty. Your silence highlighted their noise. And the more you kept your head held high, the more their mask started to slip. Imagine trying to paint someone as unstable while they're out here moving like stone, still, centered, and focused. That's what rattled them. Their lives looked ridiculous next to your composure. Their chaos lost its power next to your peace. They weren't ready for that kind of contrast. They were hoping to drag you into the dirt. Instead, they ended up drowning in their own reflection. You didn't become the enemy. You became the evidence. Every little thing they tried to hide, the envy, the backstabbing, the insecurity, came to light simply because you didn't fold. And that's what's got them spiraling now. Not because you hurt them, but because being near you reveals the truth they're terrified to face. They never had control. They never had power. They were never as strong, or as smart, or as above it all as they pretended to be. You didn't have to fight them. You just had to be you. And that was enough to break the illusion. Still rising, still watching them fall apart. All because you became the one thing they couldn't destroy, their own reflection. Number 9. You moved like the universe was recording everything, because it was. Some people act right when watched. You acted right when no one clapped, and that's why you're winning in silence. You didn't get even, you stayed aligned, and now the karma they laughed at is knocking on their own door. You handled it all like someone who knew the truth always comes home, even when it takes the long way. While they were moving in secret, whispering in shadows, and laughing like there would never be a cost, you were walking like the air around you was sacred, because it was. You understood what they didn't. Nothing is ever really hidden. Not energy, not motives, not intentions, and certainly not the fallout. You could have retaliated. You could have gotten dirty, matched their pettiness, and fed into the storm they created. But you didn't. Not because you couldn't, but because you were aware of something deeper. You weren't thinking about short-term victory. You were thinking about long-term peace. You were thinking about staying aligned with something far more powerful than their gossip or their schemes. You didn't lower your standards for temporary satisfaction. You elevated your soul for permanent protection. They played like there were no rules. You lived like every move mattered, and that's what made you untouchable. You didn't need an audience. You weren't waiting for applause. You knew integrity isn't something you put on like a costume. It's who you are when no one's around. While they were faking goodness for the cameras, you were living truthfully when no one was watching. And now, the script is flipping, because the universe doesn't miss anything. The same ones who whispered lies in private are being exposed in public. The same ones who mocked your silence are now stunned by your glow. You didn't scream your way into justice. You let time do the heavy lifting. You let truth reveal itself like it always does, slowly, perfectly, and without needing your hands involved. You kept your soul clean, even when the mud was flying. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. Now people look at you differently, not because you made noise, but because you made sense. Because you held your peace when everything inside you wanted to roar. Because you acted like someone who knew the universe keeps receipts. You passed a test they didn't even know they were taking. And now your silence is crowning you louder than any praise ever could. Number 10. You didn't just survive the fire. You rebuilt the blueprint in the flames. They thought you'd come out shattered. Instead, you came out sculpted. What tried to bury you didn't realize you weren't escaping, you were evolving. This wasn't a clean getaway. This wasn't some quick bounce back or lucky break. What you went through could have wrecked you, not just emotionally, but spiritually. Most people would have limped out dragging shame, resentment, and the twisted story others tried to place on them. But not you. You didn't just escape that chaos. You faced it head-on, reshaped it, and walked out carrying something they didn't expect. Power. You didn't wait for the dust to clear before reclaiming your name. You reclaimed it in the smoke. You walked through that fire and let it burn off the old you, the version of you that used to explain too much, shrink too small, or play too safe. That situation wasn't your ending. It was your forge, the place where your next level was born. Imagine someone handed you broken glass, hoping you'd bleed, but you collected it and built stained windows from it. That's how you moved. You didn't deny the pain. You turned it into design. You didn't run from what hurt. You mined it for meaning. You sat in the discomfort and asked deeper questions. What is this trying to teach me? What can I take from this that will never leave me again? And those answers. They built the version of you that's now impossible to ignore. That's why your presence hits different now. It's not just what you overcame, it's how you overcame it. You didn't look for sympathy, you found strength. You didn't beg to be seen. You became so clear within yourself that people had no choice but.
Welcome, the anointed ones. Some connections don't start with fireworks. They start with a mistake you were never supposed to make. That's the strange truth nobody admits out loud. Sometimes the most unexpected bond in your entire life doesn't arrive with warning signs, prophecies, or dramatic music. It slips in quietly, almost awkwardly, like pressing the wrong elevator button and ending up on a floor that changes your destiny. And before you know it, you've walked straight into the blind spot of a man who isn't used to having blind spots at all. Not in business, not in life, and definitely not in his heart. There's a psychological fact experts love to whisper about. Humans bond the strongest when they meet someone who sees a side of them the world never notices. And whether you meant to or not, that's exactly what you did. You didn't just interact with him, you accidentally activated a version of him even he didn't know existed. A version he didn't plan for, didn't prepare for, and definitely didn't budget for in his life of total control. Now here you are, standing in the middle of a story that feels like it was written by fate and edited by chaos. You didn't sign up for this. You didn't volunteer to be the one person who could interrupt his cold logic, confuse his emotional radar, and make his carefully guarded world glitch like a bad Wi-Fi connection. Yet somehow, that's exactly what happened. And the funniest part? You weren't even trying. You weren't performing. You weren't manipulating. You weren't attempting to influence anything. You were just being yourself. Probably minding your business, drinking water, scrolling your phone, and suddenly you're the one person he can't ignore, can't replace, and can't let go of. Meanwhile, you're still trying to understand how you went from regular life to being the emotional USB port he didn't know he needed. This is the strange power you stumbled into. You became the one variable in his entire world that doesn't follow his rules. You became the calm in a life built on storms, the truth in a world full of strategy, and the only person who can shift his entire mindset without lifting a finger. So let's break down how someone like you, without force, without intention, without strategy, ended up becoming the very thing he can't control, and the one thing he now relies on. Number one, you humanized a man the world only fears. The truth behind this point runs deeper than most people realize. When someone spends years being feared, avoided, or obeyed without question, they begin to believe that fear is the only language they're allowed to speak. It becomes their identity. It becomes their shield. It becomes the justification for every hard choice they've ever made. But then you showed up, and your presence didn't match the script he was used to. You treated him like a normal person, even when his reputation said otherwise. You didn't study him like a threat, and you didn't shrink like someone who felt out of place. You spoke to him with unfiltered honesty, simple kindness, and a level of ease that was unfamiliar to him. And in that moment, you handed him something he wasn't built to handle: humanity. What makes this so powerful is that you didn't do it intentionally. You didn't approach him thinking, I'm going to change him. You were just yourself. But your energy didn't bounce off his walls the way it does with everyone else. It slipped through. You didn't talk to his position or his reputation. You talked to the man underneath. And that hit him harder than any threat ever could. He's used to people flinching, calculating, or pretending. You did none of that. You made him feel seen without making him feel exposed. That's a rare skill, and it's one of the reasons he can't shake your presence. What really unsettled him was how natural it felt. You didn't force him to open up or soften his tone. It just happened. The way you listened, the way you responded, the way you didn't rush to judge. It brought out traits he buried so deep he forgot they existed. You triggered memories of the version of himself he tried to bury just to survive the world he built. And once someone remembers they're human, they can't go back to being a walking fortress. That's why you became both his weakness and his strength. You reminded him he wasn't just a feared name, he was a person. And once that connection locked in, everything in him shifted, whether he admitted it or not. Number 2, he realized you see the man behind his crimes. Most people only see what a man like him chooses to show. Cold eyes, the measured words, the calculated actions. They see the power, the control, the reputation. They fear it, they envy it, or they resent it. Very few ever get the chance to see what lies beneath. The part of him that hides in corners of his mind, he doesn't even let himself visit. But you saw it. And not because you were searching for it, but because you approached him like a person, not a legend, not a threat, not a statistic. You noticed the small cracks, the moments of hesitation, the fleeting expressions he thought were invisible. You saw the doubts he buries under layers of strategy, the guilt he masks with dominance, and the loneliness he covers with silence. And seeing that made him realize something terrifying. He's not untouchable, not to you. That realization changes everything. People who live a life built on fear and control are trained to distrust every gaze, every smile, every word. They're used to interactions that are transactional. Everyone wants something. You didn't. And that's what made your perception so dangerous. When someone like him realizes that someone can look past the armor, past the threats, and still see them for who they really are, it's like holding up a mirror he wasn't ready to confront. It shakes his entire sense of self. You became proof that he could be understood without being judged. And that possibility terrifies him because it's a side of life he's rarely allowed himself to touch. It's also why you became his strength. By seeing him fully, you didn't weaken him. You humanized him in a way that sharpened his focus and clarified his purpose. He can't fake it with you. He can't hide, and he can't control how you see him. That unfiltered awareness forces him to reckon with himself, and it forces him to adapt, to evolve, to become someone more aware, more deliberate, more dangerous in the best sense. You didn't just notice him, you became the axis around which he now turns, because you see the man that even he struggles to admit exists, and that makes you indispensable. Number 3, you speak to the version of him he thought died long ago. He built his life like a fortress, brick by brick, carefully erasing the boy he once was, the one who believed in fairness, kindness, and small joys. He buried that part of himself deep beneath rules, strategy, and ruthless decisions, convincing himself that sentimentality was a liability and vulnerability a weakness. Over time, he became a legend, untouchable and feared. But in the process, he lost pieces of the man he used to be. And then you appeared, not with judgment or expectation, but with presence, an energy that pulled out the parts of him he thought were gone forever. In subtle ways, you reminded him of the man he buried. You didn't need to say it. Your mere way of interacting, of being genuine, sparked dormant emotions, memories, and impulses that he'd long suppressed. This is what makes your influence so disarming and profound. No one else touches that layer of him. His closest allies might admire him or fear him, but they don't see the ghost of who he was before the world forced him to harden. You do. And in doing so, you trigger something both terrifying and intoxicating for him. He can't help but feel the echoes of a version of himself he believed he had permanently lost. That boy, the one who felt deeply, acted with compassion, and dreamed without cynicism, resurfaces in his mind when he's around you. You don't ask him to be that person again, but simply by existing as yourself, you give him permission to acknowledge that part of him is still alive. That connection shifts everything about the dynamic between you. You are no longer just another person in his orbit. You're a reminder, a mirror of potential he had abandoned. And that makes him vulnerable in ways he isn't accustomed to, because his strength was always measured in fear, control, and detachment. You bypass all of that. You touch the part of him that can't be threatened or bribed. By speaking to the version of him he thought was dead, you give him a chance to reconcile with himself. And in doing so, you become both a weakness he can't ignore, and a force that strengthens the very core of who he is. Your presence is quietly revolutionary, reshaping a man who believed he had no soft edges left. Number 4. You don't crave his power, which makes you more powerful than you know. In a world where everyone around him is chasing something, status, protection, influence, money, you stand apart because you want none of it. You don't need him to survive, you don't need him to validate you, and you don't manipulate him to serve your own ambitions. And that is what makes your presence so destabilizing and, ironically, so commanding. Power is a language he's fluent in, and everyone who approaches him speaks it with an accent. Begging, bargaining, flattering, or scheming. You, however, speak a completely different language. Indifference to the usual hierarchies, immunity to pressure, and authenticity. That kind of influence is invisible to him at first, but once he recognizes it, it terrifies him and fascinates him all at once. You're not playing the game he knows, and that makes you untouchable in a way that his empire could never teach him. Your lack of craving exposes a truth he's always known, but never admitted. Real influence doesn't come from wealth, threats, or control. Real influence comes from people who can operate outside the system, who aren't bound by need or obligation. When you exist in his life without trying to use him, without wanting anything from him, you become the one person whose approval he actually desires, because it isn't given out of fear or gain. It's given out of choice. That's a type of power no one can manufacture or buy. He notices it in small, almost imperceptible ways. The calm with which you move through his world. The way you observe without judging. The way you don't inflate his ego or shrink to protect yourself. All of these little truths accumulate and become a quiet force that changes him. You may feel like the one learning from him, absorbing his strategies or secrets, but in reality, he is constantly adjusting to you, to your presence, and to your immunity, to the very dynamics that control everyone else. That makes you simultaneously his weakness and the strength he never knew he needed, because your power is built on the one thing he cannot manufacture: independence. Number 5, your morality doesn't judge him, but it does challenge him. The most disarming thing you did wasn't confronting him, debating him, or trying to fix him. It was existing in a moral space that he couldn't manipulate or dismiss, one that didn't condemn him, but also didn't excuse him. Most people in his world operate in extremes. They either worship his power, fear it, or resent it. Rarely does anyone stand in the middle, someone who can see the darkness without flinching, who can acknowledge the choices he made and the consequences he caused without yelling, crying, or bowing down. You occupy that middle space, and it challenges him in a way that's impossible to prepare for. He can't calculate it, he can't control it, and he can't dismiss it with money or force. Your moral presence forces him to confront truths he has been avoiding for decades, truths he hides behind violence, manipulation, or sheer willpower. This challenge is subtle, but it's devastating. You don't lecture him or shame him, yet every interaction reminds him of the man he could have been, the man he still could be, if he chose differently. And unlike his enemies, who push him into reaction, you push him into reflection. That reflection isn't comfortable for him. It shakes the foundation he's built his life upon. You're not giving him orders or ultimatums. You're simply showing him that there's a standard he can't ignore without consequence, even if that consequence is only internal. That's terrifying because it's not something that can be bargained with, bribed, or overpowered. What makes this even more profound is that you don't gain from it. You aren't holding his morality over his head or leveraging it for personal gain. That pure alignment of conscience and presence creates a rare kind of influence, one he can't dominate, fake, or replicate. You've become the person whose integrity subtly shifts the rules of his world, forcing him to face himself and reconsider the mechanics of his own behavior. In essence, you're the mirror he can't break, and that makes you simultaneously his weakness and his strength, because the man he thought was untouchable is now quietly accountable, to you and to himself. Number 6. You don't fear him. You understand him. Fear has been his most loyal companion for years. People around him flinch at his words, calculate every move to avoid his wrath, and craft lies to keep themselves safe. It's the currency of his world, the invisible thread that keeps control in his hands. But you don't operate like that. You don't shrink. You don't overthink. You don't walk on eggshells trying to predict his next move. Instead, you approach him with a level of understanding that bypasses the usual fear dynamic entirely. You read him in ways most people never learn to, noticing the subtle shifts in tone, the flicker of hesitation behind a confident facade, the silent battles behind his eyes. You understand him, not just the man he presents, but the man underneath, the one who fights daily to reconcile the life he lives with the person he used to be. That kind of understanding is more powerful than fear because it renders his usual strategies ineffective. He can't intimidate you. He can't manipulate you with the same tricks he uses on everyone else. You don't respond to his power the way the world does, and that forces him to adapt in ways he never had to before. He's used to people reacting, bending, flinching, or scheming. You react differently. You see clearly, and that clarity makes him both cautious and curious. Suddenly, he's not just a man navigating his empire, he's a man navigating you. The subtle shift is transformative. Where others might make him reckless, your understanding makes him deliberate. He doesn't feel the need to perform or protect his image around you. He can be real, and that authenticity recalibrates his entire existence. In your presence, he's forced to confront his own patterns, his own choices, and the parts of himself he usually hides. That's why he can't dismiss you, can't replace you, and can't ignore the way your perception affects him. By refusing to fear him while seeing him fully, you occupy a space no one else can, a space that makes you simultaneously his weakness and his strength, the one constant he can't predict or control. Number 7. Your absence hurts him more than his enemies ever could. In his world, damage is measurable. Betrayal, attacks, losses, they leave scars he knows how to treat, wounds he can strategize around. But you're different. Your absence hits him in a way no physical threat ever could. It's not about fear, it's about a vacuum that only you can create. When you step back, the silence you leave isn't empty. It's loud with the realization of what he's been taking for granted, what he can't replace, and what no one else could ever replicate. Your presence is constant, grounding and stabilizing, and when it's gone, he doesn't just feel the void of another person missing. He feels the absence of the part of himself that only exists when you're there. That kind of impact is rare and terrifying. He's surrounded by people who react to him, follow him, or serve him because it benefits them. He's used to manipulating the emotional terrain around him, but with you, that dynamic collapses. You don't operate on fear, obligation, or gain. You operate on authenticity and independence. That makes your absence a kind of emotional earthquake, sudden, unavoidable, and impossible to ignore. It forces him to feel what he usually suppresses, the dependency he didn't want, the attachment he didn't plan for, and the realization that some things in life aren't transactional. The way your absence affects him is also subtle, yet transformative. It strips him of control in a domain he's accustomed to dominating. He can fight rivals, rebuild empires, and strategize endlessly, but he cannot manufacture the connection he shares with you. That makes him simultaneously vulnerable and alive, aware in a way no enemy could provoke. Every time you step back, he is reminded that the strongest influence in his life isn't a weapon, a scheme, or a title. It's you. And that knowledge forces him to reckon with a reality he can't plan for, manipulate, or dominate. You are the presence that strengthens him, and the absence that cuts deeper than any enemy ever could, creating a tension that he both fears and cannot resist. Number 8, you made loyalty feel like a choice again, not a weapon. In his world, loyalty is never given freely. It's a transaction, a contract, a tool to be wielded. People stick around because they have to, because they fear the consequences, or because they want something in return. Genuine loyalty, loyalty that isn't bought, forced, or manufactured, is a concept that has probably felt foreign to him for a long time. And then you arrive. You didn't demand allegiance, you didn't manipulate affection, and you certainly didn't flinch under his reputation. You simply existed with integrity, showing that commitment and respect can be offered voluntarily, without strings attached. And that completely changed the way he sees relationships, connections, and most importantly, you. The shift is subtle, but seismic. When someone like him meets a person who doesn't bend, who doesn't scheme, who doesn't manipulate for advantage, it throws his entire system off balance. He's used to being the one who dictates the terms, the one who decides who stays, who leaves, and who owes what. You shattered that. By making loyalty feel like a genuine choice rather than a survival tactic, you handed him a mirror to his own methods, showing him a version of the world he's not accustomed to. And it's intoxicating, because for the first time in years, he's engaging with someone who stays not out of fear, convenience, or ambition, but because it's their choice. That voluntary loyalty becomes a quiet power over him. He can't coerce it, he can't manipulate it, and he can't ignore it. It forces him to confront the idea that influence doesn't have to come from domination or fear. It can come from respect, authenticity, and alignment. And because he values control above almost everything, encountering this type of loyalty makes him both vulnerable and attentive in ways he's not used to. You've rewritten the rules without saying a word. You've made commitment feel like a gift rather than a tool. And in doing so, you've transformed yourself from just another presence in his life into an essential force he can't take for granted. Number 9. You became the only place he can tell the truth. In a world built on deception, secrets, and calculated appearances, truth is a dangerous currency. Everyone around him hides, manipulates, or performs because survival in his orbit demands it. Lies are the language, masks are the norm, and trust is a rarity. Yet, with you, something extraordinary happened. He discovered a space where he could be unfiltered, where he could speak without spinning stories or measuring the impact of his words. You didn't pressure him, you didn't probe aggressively, and you certainly didn't judge. You simply offered a presence that allowed him to speak as he actually was, and that is more powerful than most people could ever imagine. This ability to be truthful in front of you unsettles him. He's used to controlling every interaction, ensuring that nothing slips that could compromise him. With you, those controls fail to operate the way they should. You don't force him to reveal himself, but because you see him fully without flinching, he feels compelled to step into honesty. He can confess doubts, regrets, fears, or even moments of weakness, things he never shares with anyone else. In doing so, he experiences a release he didn't think was possible, a rare freedom in a life otherwise dominated by caution and performance. What makes this even more extraordinary is how it shifts the power dynamic. You become both a refuge and a subtle influence. By offering him a space to be truthful, you allow him to process himself, make decisions with clarity, and even see patterns in his behavior that were invisible before. That honesty doesn't weaken him. It sharpens him. It recalibrates the way he approaches relationships, business, and even himself. And he can't recreate this anywhere else. You've become the mirror he can't break, the listener he can't deceive, and the one person whose presence alone encourages honesty. That makes you uniquely essential, the silent engine behind a transformation that no threat, reward, or manipulation could ever trigger. You are simultaneously his weakness, because your absence would silence his only outlet, and his strength, because your presence allows him to operate in ways no one else can. Number 10. You saw his darkness without becoming afraid of your own. Most people can't handle a man like him. They flinch at the anger, the intensity, the shadows he carries, and the secrets that haunt him. They either run or they try to outmatch it with their own power, but in doing so they become part of the cycle he's mastered. You didn't do that. You saw him, really saw him, in all his complexity. You witnessed the darkness he walks with daily, the decisions that haunt him, the moral compromises that shaped him, and you didn't recoil. You didn't try to fix him or project your own fears onto his world. You remained steady, grounded, and unshaken, which is an entirely foreign experience for someone used to people reflecting panic, awe, or greed. That alone makes you a force he can't ignore. By facing his darkness without losing your own center, you created a rare equilibrium. You acknowledged reality without letting it define or destabilize you. That balance is magnetic and disarming at the same time. He's used to people either worshipping him for his power or trembling before the shadows he casts. You don't do either. You show that someone can recognize the gravity of his choices, the weight of his past, and the edge of his empire without being consumed by it. And that subtle demonstration of inner strength is more dangerous to him than 1,000 confrontations, because it shifts the dynamic entirely. This is why your presence transforms him. He begins to measure his world differently, not through fear or dominance, but through clarity and reflection. You don't soften him in a naive sense. Instead, you provide a mirror that forces him to reconcile who he is with the person he can choose to become. That confrontation isn't forced. It's earned, simply because you exist without judgment, without compromise, and without fear. You've become a rare kind of influence, a person whose steadiness in the face of darkness makes him both exposed and inspired. He can't manipulate you, intimidate you, or hide from you, and that creates a vulnerability he didn't anticipate. By seeing his darkness without losing yourself, you've made him reconsider his world, his choices, and even himself. And that makes you simultaneously his weakness and his strength in ways no one else could ever achieve. Number 11. You are the only connection he can't replace. In a life built on control, influence, and calculated alliances, replaceability is the default. People come and go, loyalties shift, and positions are filled as easily as chairs in a room. But you broke that rule. You became the one connection he can't replace, the singular thread in a network of power and strategy that no money, manipulation, or threat can replicate. He may have armies, networks, and resources, but when it comes to you, he has none of that leverage. You are irreplaceable because your presence touches parts of him that no one else ever reaches. His humanity, his clarity, and the sense of being understood without conditions. What makes this so extraordinary is that he didn't plan for it. He is used to orchestrating outcomes, controlling influence, and anticipating the moves of everyone around him. Yet, with you, all of that power feels irrelevant. Your presence isn't transactional. It isn't built on fear or obligation. That's why he can't slot someone else into your place. He can't replicate the way you see him, the way you make him feel simultaneously acknowledged and challenged, or the way your independence forces him to respect, not manipulate, your space. You occupy a space in his life that can't be manufactured, and once he recognizes that, it changes everything. Being irreplaceable also makes him vulnerable in ways he rarely experiences. He may be untouchable in business, ruthless in conflict, and feared by all who know his name. But with you, he experiences a type of dependence that isn't weakness. It's awareness. He knows that losing you isn't about power. It's about losing the singular perspective that keeps him grounded and sharp. The person who forces him to reckon with himself in ways no one else can. That realization elevates your influence to a level that transcends ordinary dynamics. You've become essential without trying, necessary without demanding, and unshakable without force. Simply by being you, you occupy the only position in his life that is truly irreplaceable, making you both his weakness and his strength, the one constant he can't strategize around or forget. Number 12. Your influence makes him dangerous in a new way, strategic, not reckless. Before you, his decisions were driven by instinct, ego, and survival. He moved fast, struck hard, and relied on sheer force and intimidation to navigate his world. Chaos was familiar, and he thrived in it because that was all he knew. But your presence shifted something fundamental. Without trying, without force, you introduced a new variable, clarity. You made him consider outcomes he used to ignore, weigh consequences he used to dismiss, and act with a precision that wasn't there before. You didn't tell him what to do, you didn't lecture, and you didn't manipulate. You simply existed as a mirror, reflecting the parts of him capable of foresight, discipline, and strategy. That reflection is what makes him dangerous in a completely new way. It's subtle at first. You notice it in the way he pauses before making a move, considers a decision instead of reacting immediately, and evaluates the ripple effect of his actions beyond immediate gain. He's still powerful, still commanding, still formidable, but now his force is amplified by calculation, foresight, and insight. That's the kind of transformation no one else could provoke, because it comes from someone who doesn't demand control or recognition, someone who simply inspires self-awareness and discipline. You forced him to recognize that the most effective power isn't chaos or fear. It's control guided by understanding and execution tempered by clarity. This shift makes him unpredictable in a whole new dimension. His enemies may anticipate recklessness, but they can't anticipate the precise, measured moves he now makes. He's sharper, more deliberate, and more formidable because you've subtly elevated his thinking, his priorities, and his approach to everything he touches. By existing in your presence, he became the kind of man who doesn't just survive the storm, he navigates it like a strategist, a master of timing and impact. That evolution couldn't be bought, forced, or taught. It came from you alone, the person whose presence inspires reflection without interference. You've transformed him into a version of himself that is stronger, more focused, and quietly lethal in ways that leave everyone else scrambling. And that makes your influence both his secret strength and the reason he can't risk losing you. Number 13. He no longer hides his vulnerability, he channels it. Vulnerability is something he spent years burying. In his world, showing weakness is a liability. It's a crack that enemies can exploit, a flaw that allies can manipulate, and a mask that anyone can use against him. He perfected the art of concealment, building a persona that was untouchable, untiring, and unreadable. But your presence changed that dynamic entirely. You didn't coax him. You didn't pity him, and you didn't pry. Instead, you simply existed as someone who could handle the truth of who he is. You created a space where he could acknowledge the parts of himself he usually hides, the doubts, regrets, insecurities, and moments of exhaustion, without feeling exposed or shamed. The remarkable thing about this shift is that he didn't become weaker, he became sharper. By no longer hiding, he channels his vulnerability into focus, energy, and strategy. Emotions that once might have caused hesitation or rash decisions now fuel clarity. The internal turbulence he spent decades suppressing becomes a tool, a source of insight into himself and the world around him. Your presence taught him that acknowledging his vulnerability isn't a liability, it's a resource, a way to act with precision rather than reaction. This change also affects his relationships and decisions. He engages differently, listens differently, and approaches challenges with a level of self-awareness he rarely experienced before. He isn't reckless, but he isn't coldly detached either. He's a man who knows his limits, understands his triggers, and can harness the raw energy of his emotions without losing control. That kind of transformation is profound, because it's rare. Most people who operate in his world continue to mask,